This episode is brought to you by Ghost Patch. Ghost Patch is a law enforcement owned and operated company specializing in patches, coins, and flex shields. Quality is top priority with low prices. They always offer free design work and never charge mold or setup fees. Stop letting the big companies rip you off and check out Ghost Patch at ghostpatch.com and ghostpatchcustom.com. Now to the next story.
The reality is coming up in Southeast, it probably prepared for all of us that were out at that scene that night to, like Canetti mentioned, is just to instinctively react, right? I mean, you didn't have to have a sergeant or somebody there telling you, you go to the back, you go here, you go inside, you search, you do CPR. We probably in our career just responded to so many critical incidents where our partners, our colleagues were involved in that, that night, March 17th, 2009, in all honesty, our number got called. And, we couldn't have asked for a better crew of people there. I wouldn't have wanted anybody else there other than Martin and Dave and Junior and I. It's complete training, We had been out maybe 4 or 5 years, but the tactics and stuff like that they train you, you're in the academy class, you understand it, or, that annual training. But that training that night solved a lot of things that night, probably saved our lives and some other lives too. And so I think that really paid off there, because if we hadn't been there, he would have been gone. He wasn't a slow individual. The only thing that slowed him and dropped him that night were the gunshots. I started understanding, these community members, they're actually victims. We don't see them every day because they aren't the ones calling 911, but they're victims in their neighborhood. And so what I learned is, as I got, the certified fraud examiner certification, stuff like that, is I started learning, a lot of people don't see it, but businesses are victims too. These businesses, they serve our communities, they employ the people, and, they're the ones suffering financial loss. And some of these businesses go out of business based on what the suspect did. They're the ones that pay the taxes too, and they're the ones that, employ officers and all these things, and they really need to be served.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community. And now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Although I am but one man, I have brothers and sisters who are the same. They will lay down their lives for me, and I for them. We stand together, a thin blue line, protecting the prey from the predators, the good from the bad. We are the police. End of watch. This profession is unique in that you go to work every day and can face a life-changing or life-ending event. And you rely on the coworkers, your partners, to either save your life or you save them. Threat is always there, but it may never truly show itself for years. Then suddenly you are looking evil in the face. Today's guest has faced this evil, and he prevailed. But when this job asks you to fly that close to the sun, it's hard not to get burned and scarred. I'm very excited to finally sit down with this guest, as he is an extremely genuine and kind human being. He also just happens to be a cop. And I think by the time the listeners hear the Never Give Up on You song, you will know that he has a servant's heart, and he is a brother you can count on. we're proud to welcome on, finally, Detective Justin Bowen. He's a financial crimes detective. He is part of the ATO. He's our treasurer. We're going to get into that. Justin, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, I ran out of people to get on. So I want to welcome on my co-host. Kent Wolverton's here. Danny Canetti's here. And we have a special guest co-host that we've never had on the mic, Juan Hernandez. Can you tell the listener who you are?
So my name is Detective Juan Hernandez Jr. Been on the department 22 years. Most of my career spent in Southeast. And going forward now, the president of National Latino Law Enforcement Organization, NLLEO as it's known, here in Dallas.
Can you tell the listener, I mean, we have different associations here with Dallas PD and like a lot of other departments across the country. We have the Dallas Police Association. We have the BPA. We have the NLEO. Can you tell the listener a little bit about NLEO's history and the size and the members and et cetera?
Yeah, a little bit of the history. It's gone through several changes throughout. At first, a lot of people know it as NLLPOA. Back in 1991, kind of joined with that organization. It was started by Gil Cerda, Steve Fuentes, Willie Cantu, Ray Cervantes, just for Latinos in the Dallas Police Department to have a voice when it came to transfers and promotions. In 1997, we had Rock Ramos, George Aranda, and Miguel Sarmiento. Raised it a little bit more where we actually hired some attorneys to get better representation for the members. And in 2017, it was rebranded to NLEO. We separated from LPOA. A lot of people still kind of know us that, but we rebranded to NLEO. And that's when we partnered with CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas. So NLEO right now, we have about 1,800 members strong, and we have about 12 chapters within the U.S.
Okay, and you're now the president.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've known you for a very long time, and I'm really happy for you, and I'm happy for that association to have a leader like you that's over it. So I think you're very open-minded to working with others, and I think you're going to do great things there for your association.
I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
We're going to edit that out. Anyway, so now we're going to get into the guest of honor. He's got his white wedding dress on. We're going to get in here.
First off, I just have to say, go back 17 years, and when we were all in Southeast Substation, would you have thought, looking at all each other, that we'd be here in this room
absolutely
doing
not.
Something like this?
No.
No, we're
Weird.
Definitely not our host.
It is very.
Would this be the guy we would pick for our host?
Oh,
Probably
absolutely
not.
not.
That would be a joke, right?
I could see everybody else in the room, yes, but
I mean, yeah, I would never imagine that we would be doing a show when Juan's Junior's a president. You being a financial crimes detective, that doesn't surprise me. Kent's a narcotics, and Danny, of course, SWATs. That's not a surprise, but yeah, doing the shows, it was not on it wasn't on the radar.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I'll just chime in here real quick because Junior, you kind of, first of all, as I'll refer to him as Junior, obviously that's the only way I know him. Anytime anybody calls him Juan, I'm thrilled because I don't know him as that. I've always called him Junior. But just say I'm proud of you for the position that you've taken on and the leadership that you're going to show that organization. So sitting in that car all those years ago, obviously I never, similar to what Joe just said, knew where we were going to be in 20 years. But I'm proud of you for that, and I'm glad you've taken on that spot, though.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
With all support, I mean, I've gotten a lot of communication from other officers, and again, it's nothing's going to change. But I think as we progress through our careers, everybody has a different vision. So moving forward, I appreciate the kind words.
Of course.
Well, ATO is here for you.
Thank you.
Justin, let's get in your story. Talk about where you grew up, early home life.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about just growing up. Really, I grew up in an area where I didn't really know the technical term probably until I met you guys at Southeast of it, but the Deep Grove, right? And so,
oh God,
yeah. Well, you're not the only one. I know when Junior and I went out there first, he was a little thrilled by that too.
Yep.
So initially, I grew up. I was probably when I was around first grade. I was over off Lawson in the trailers out there. We lived in the trailer park across from Over the Hill Club. If you guys ever knew where that was,
I frequent that now that I'm 50. So.
Yeah. And then shortly thereafter, we moved to Seagoville, though. And so probably about 6 years old, moved to Seagoville, and then grew up in Seagoville. So went to Seagoville elementary schools all the way through high school. And that's where I graduated. So my childhood I was raised, it was really boys. Myself and my brother and my 4 cousins were all boys. And we were really raised by my mom, my aunt, and my grandma. And so those are the ones that really raised us out there. And then our uncles would chime in. But so that's kind of how it came up.
So Seagoville is it's just south of the Dallas area, kind of southeast, right?
Yeah, it's just outside Deep Grove there. Yep.
Okay, so it's right on the edge.
Right on the edge, yeah.
Okay. A lot of spillover.
There's a lot of spillover. I encountered a number of people I went to high school with or went to school with and stuff
yeah,
like
and
that.
it's so funny that you ended up over in the Grove working that part of town.
Yes, sir.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was.
So what about college? What did you tell us about that? Because I know you have a really unique education history.
So just in Seagoville High School, really, I was really active and stuff. And so I didn't really know the course I would take. And so when I left Seagoville High School, I went to college up north, did a year at prep school in Monmouth, New Jersey, and then went and did a couple of years at West Point, actually. And so prior to my junior year, I came back home, but spent 2 years up there. And, really up there a lot. I don't talk too much about it, obviously, because I didn't spend all 4 there. And so, but I did do 2 years there and just, met a ton of great people. I think probably the most influence on me, obviously, other than the school and the individuals I met there, were just some of the speakers you dealt with, the firsthand encounters. You really met people and you realize that leadership comes in all forms and it comes from all sizes and it comes from all directions. And so, at first you really believe that leaders come out of the academies, which they do, and there's no doubt about that. But as life goes on, you understand that leaders come from everywhere. And so you take what you want from leaders, the good and the bad, and you leave the bad, right? And so that's really what I learned up there prior to coming back home and starting this new venture. So,
man, West Point, that's gotta be, that's interesting. You told me that yesterday, and I had no idea that that you went there.
Yeah.
Wow, it was a long way from Seagoville.
No, a long way. It was cold there, and I remember the first night I went. So my grades weren't as good as they should have been. Probably in high school, they were pretty good, but not good enough for the academy. So they sent me to the preparatory school at Monmouth for a year, and so really, in our school or in growing up, I wouldn't say we were poor. My mom worked 2 jobs to provide for us, but we didn't travel or anything like that, right? So we didn't get to see the world. So the first time that I went up there to go to prep school, I remember that, and we had travel agencies back then, right? We have the internet to do that stuff. So booked a flight into New Jersey, which I had never been to before, and I don't know why. We had to report at 6 a.m. the next morning, and so the only flight I booked got me there at 10 p.m. Didn't have money for a hotel, motel, or anything like that, and wouldn't know how to get to one anyways, and so I actually slept in the airport there in Newark the night before, and the next morning hailed a cab and showed up. So yeah, so that was far from Seagoville. Yeah.
Yeah. So what got you in? I know the answer to this, but what got you into law enforcement and why Dallas?
I think as a child, just coming up, I think I was fascinated by law enforcement. Obviously, you watched all the shows, you played all the games, cops and robbers, stuff like that, right? So I had an interest in it, and when I came home back to Dallas, I stayed with my mom probably for about a week, and she let me stay there, and that wasn't an issue. But a week, you're 20 years old, and within a week, I probably was like, no, I need to look in these magazines, look for an apartment, and it led me to a 400 square foot apartment, $400 a month up off Rosemead Parkway.
Wow!
So Channel 6. And so I ended up there, and so I had to find a job, of course, and so just looking, and back then you look through papers and, however you could look. It wasn't like Indeed or offer, those jobs. And so I found a job at Valley View Mall, and so I went out and interviewed as a security officer and got that job.
Rest in peace, Valley View Mall.
Yes, absolutely.
It is it looks like a war zone. It's all gone.
Pour water every time we drop by there.
Yeah. So you worked there, and then you ran into somebody that was working there, and it kind of, got you thinking more about Dallas PD.
Yeah, so working there, so literally day to day, I only worked there for a year. And so when I started working there, I met the Hernandez brothers. Little did I know the impact they were going to have on my lives.
Were they actually just hustling? Yeah. They were shoplifting or hustling cologne in the parking lot, right?
Well, so right next to the security desk there, if you ever went there back then, there was a fruit, one of those smoothie places. And so they had some cute girls. Yeah, cute girls that worked there. So that's where you could always find one of them. And so, yeah, that was the case.
Well, Valley View Mall, I got to say, though, it was a nicer part of town. It was North Dallas, and Valley View Mall was a nice mall. It had a nice theater.
Yeah, no, even for me, when I started working there, I'm from Pleasant Grove. So for me, moving over there, I was like, man, now I got to drive on the other side of 30. So, I was offered the position up there. I went up there. I had some people that I knew that worked up there. And I just started working there. I think before Justin got there, I might have been there maybe 6 months to a year. I hadn't been there, but I did have seniority. So
right.
When he showed up, I was like, oh, who's this guy coming in? But yeah, that's where I met Justin there. My brother started working there also too. So if anybody knows that, my brother, Ro, he's on the department too.
Shout out, Ro. I just saw him yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I told him we were recording today.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was out there yesterday, so I talked to him this morning. But yeah, he started working too, and then like I said, Justin came in, and there's a couple other guys that started working there, and then everybody kind of made their way and said, "Hey, what's the next position we want to go to?" And I think everybody kind of came to Dallas here. Started work for the police department.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll tell you an interesting thing at Valley View is that's where I learned to smoke a cigar. Was at Valley View, up and smoke. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember I went there a lot to see the movies.
Yeah.
To see movies up there. And Aaron Dondo, I think, worked there off duty one time.
Yeah.
He used to, at one point, by the movie theater.
There were a couple officers that worked there. And so I met them through that experience, too. And so coming up through the ranks, a couple of those officers that are pretty well known on the department. But yeah, that's probably where I learned to smoke a cigar. I may have seen an officer or two in the back room there smoking a cigar, open smoke.
Kind of weird you didn't learn that in Seagoville. But,
they were smoking other things.
They're smoking other things.
But no, there's off-duty officers that work there, and they're the ones that were like, yeah, what are y'all doing here? Yeah. You guys can come over and make $35,000 a year. I was like, oh, man, that's big-time money.
Yeah, you're rolling in it.
Oh, yeah.
So when did you actually apply for DPD?
So, I joined the academy probably in June of 2004. So I probably applied in March, maybe January of that year, of 2004.
Did you apply for any other agencies?
No other agencies, no. And so one of the reasons I applied for DPD is, one is like Junior mentioned, I had met those officers there, and really it was just DPD officers, right? And so we had met them, and they talked it up. And also because Junior, I'd become good friends with them, and so really they came to DPD, and actually it was just Junior at the time. They came to DPD, and so I followed him here. So yeah,
man, y'all will hear in my intro the quote that I have, and when it comes to true partnership, y'all literally lives have paralleled for a long time. So talk about academy life.
Well, academy life, actually, coming from the academy up north, when I came to the academy, I was 5'9", 150. And so I was in shape. I could run. I could do all those things. So really academy life wasn't an issue, even with the academics. The academics wasn't the issue at all. I think I was probably one of the youngest ones. There may have been one younger than me in the academy, so we were just kind of like treated like the babies. But, we only had 26 people in our academy. And the age range really, they graduated. And the age range, we probably ranged from 45 age down to 21, which is what I was. But academy life was great, and everybody respected each other. Everybody got along, and everybody worked together. We really did have a good academy class.
What class number was that?
282. And we graduated in January of 2005. So yeah.
And then he went out to God's country, Southeast, right?
Hold on, don't skip the class motto. We got to get the corny class motto.
Oh yeah. What was your class motto?
I don't know, what was it?
It's something blue. It was with a 2, so it had to be something with a blue. Come on.
Oh man, you're gonna call me out on this. So I'm not sure. I have to get back to you on that one.
You probably. You didn't write it.
Danny's gonna cut that one out.
Yeah, Danny's got to take that out.
Take it out.
This is embarrassing. Yeah, you don't even remember your class motto.
You can say it.
Who invited this guy?
So you get out to Southeast. Talk about that.
Well, when we were in the academy, obviously they give you a wish list, right? And so I think I wrote Southeast at the top. And, back then I didn't know much about Southeast. So growing up in Seagoville, I never really did come to where Junior grew up in the Grove itself. I think maybe I went to a competition in high school in Buckner one time, but that was it, Skyline.
Yeah.
Other than that, I never traveled those
cigar
streets.
smoking competition.
So, absolutely. So they weren't smoking cigars either. Though,
No, growing up, when we met, and I told him, it's like, yeah, he's from the Grove. I was like, what part of the Grove you from? Yeah, that's what everybody asks each other. What part of the Grove you from? Oh, I'm from Deep Grove, or I'm from kind of close to Seagoville. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, down there where the flea market's at off of 175. I was like, yeah, down there. So Southeast is, a lot of people know it's very large. And when we started, we still had Channel 7.
Yeah, there was no South Central.
There was no South Central, so it was even bigger. So the Grove itself was big in its size, and then you still have South Dallas and you have South Oak Cliff. So, but yeah, no, it's a pretty large area.
Man, it was going from LaGrange down there by 20 and Lancaster Road all the way up to going back up to yeah, man, it is. Yeah. It is a road trip. Somebody called and they're getting their ass whipped. It's a long time.
It's a long time. At least 15, 20 minutes to get
yeah,
to
oh
the
yeah.
side. And we didn't have as much traffic as we have now. So
yeah, did y'all have MapsGos when you started, or did you have to use did we have AVL yet? I can't remember.
No, I had MapsGos.
Oh damn.
Yeah, we had MapsGos. I think you had the green car on that computer, right, that would move along the map. But yeah, we used MapsGos.
It took forever to update. Shit. Yeah.
And I remember, when we were on training, depending on your trainer, of course, but or my trainers at least, is you get a code 3 call and they'd make you pull over and pull it up on the MapsGo, even if they knew where it was, just to teach you. Yeah. But, one of the best things with having Channel 7 as part of Channel 3 back then is you knew if you got a call at 10 o'clock at night and you're supposed to get off at 11, you wanted to get off on time, you could take a 6X in Oak Cliff and go from Deep Grove. And by the time you got there, for the most part, that problem would have solved itself before you ever got there. Yeah. Now, I don't think I would have done it in reverse, because if you got to South Dallas, that problem would still be there, though.
Yeah,
those people stuck around.
Be 3 hours later. Turn into a homicide, the crime scene.
Yep. Go ahead and add me to that.
Yeah. Who are some of your trainers?
So my trainers, I lucked out. The first trainer I had was Third Watch. I started on Third Watch, was Jose Aranda. And so
that was my classmate.
Was he really?
Yeah, Jose, yeah.
So when I came on, I guess you're the same Joe. When I'll tell you is when I came on, I didn't even know Joe. I never saw you. And so I was training with Aranda, and I probably went 7 weeks training with him on Third Watch. And then one day I walk in to get my shotgun and my equipment and everything. Here's this short, bulky guy standing there, asking for equipment. I look at my trainer. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And he goes, oh, that's Joe King. He's been out. He's had surgery or something like that, working out.
A lot of surgery.
Yeah, it was I didn't meet Joe until everybody talked about Joe. And I'm like, who is Joe? This Joe guy everybody talks about. Then one day it was like, that's the guy with the back surgery. Oh, okay, that's him.
Well,
and then he was gone.
Yeah, I was hoping that I would win the lottery when I was out with those injuries, and I wouldn't have to come back there, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, that was your lottery.
Yeah, that was my lottery.
But no, so I had Jose Aranda, and I'll tell you, his old partner was Mullen.
Tony.
You remember Tony Mullen?
Tony Mullen.
And so Aranda, with all due respect, years of knowledge, hindsight's 2020, is the worst or the hardest phase of training was probably Aranda. And that's not any fault of his own, but it's because he was a good trainer. So really that's what any rookie needed in that first 7 weeks, was somebody that wasn't going to hold your hand and somebody that was going to put you in those tough positions. And Aranda did a good job. I remember every Friday we would eat with Tony Mullen over at El Taquito. And our Fridays were Thursdays, and Mullen would walk in, and Randa would go to the restroom wherever he'd go, and Mullen would sit down next to him.
Yeah, because that food went right through him.
But Mullen would sit down with me, and he'd say, hey, how's it going, right? And he would check up on you, because he genuinely cared, whereas Randa would, really didn't give a shit. He was going to put you through it. And I would tell him, I would say, man, this guy, of course, I didn't know they had rode all those years, and he's like, oh, this guy, he can be a jerk, or whatever. He's hard, he's this or whatever, And Mullen would just tell me, hey, just treat every day like a Friday. If you treat every day like a Friday, then you won't have any issues. And, it worked out that way, and so it was great. So I had Aranda, and I'll tell you, kind of telling myself here, but one of the last days that I was on training with Aranda, we did a traffic stop down South Dallas. And so I hated traffic stops with him because every time you got back in the car, you didn't do anything right. You know, it was like the parent that was like on top of you. And so you knew like you could write the ticket to wherever you had to. And when you got back in the car, you were going to get a chewing. But when I got, we got out on a car one time in South Dallas, it was dark, and I went over the radio to give the plate. And one of the letters happened to be L. And the word Lincoln could not come to my mind.
You said Lenore.
I sat there and I gave that license plate, and for L, I said love. And so he never let me live it down.
So a little bit about Aranda and Mullins.
Yeah.
I think they played good cop, bad cop with you, because when I had to train with Mullins, that was the worst day of my training experience. And it was like 2 days, and 2 days in a row. And the second day, he was like, "You didn't learn anything yesterday, did you? Like, you're doing everything wrong." And just rode me and I loved it. It was so funny to me because I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing. Like, I kind of have this stuff figured out. But with Tony, you didn't know anything. And then Jose, they basically worked together the entire time. So you answered a call with Jose, you answered a call with Tony.
Yeah.
So he knew to let you do everything and let you screw it up, and then he wasn't going to let it go too far. So that was his role, where Jose was like, "Hey, I gotta let this guy screw everything up."
And they reversed it.
100%.
Yeah.
They chewed me up just as bad.
Well, I'll say that Jose had a mean ass set of trainers. Like, yeah, so it sounds like what he was doing to you, that's what he learned from his trainers. He had some rough trainers. Yeah. To the point where like Scott McDonald and I and Matt Edwards we were very fortunate that we didn't have that set of trainers that Jose had.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the one thing with Jose is, and Aranda, I guess that's what I called him, but is really, really 3 to 11 is what we worked. And 3 to 11, it was professional. You had no issues, and you knew what the standard was. And so there were multiple opportunities back then because you guys worked Southeast. The calls were just always holding. And so he would ask me on multiple occasions if I wanted to work overtime. And so, of course, I'd work. I was single. I had nobody to go home to or anything. So we would work, and he would drive on overtime. And it's funny because all the things that he told you, like don't drive in the right lane, don't do this, don't do that. Whenever he got in that car, like he'd haul butt, and he would drive, and he would even handle calls differently or whatever it may be.
He just flipped the switch.
Yeah, he flipped the switch. Yeah. He treated you like a partner, though. So, but yeah. Go ahead.
No. I'm not surprised with that guy. I've known him since '97.
Yeah.
But I had never really heard about what kind of trainer he was. So this is kind of new to me, but also it makes a lot of sense to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I don't take anything away from it. I know I'm better off because he was my first face trainer, though.
Got you on a podcast. So look at you now.
Absolutely. There you go. With his classmate and didn't
Famous.
even know it.
Yeah. No, I had the chance to ride with Aranda, but I rode with him on Little T. So I got the whole opposite. Like, he was a goofball in the car.
He's a huge goofball.
Man. So, like I said, I think the first day I saw you were training with him.
Yep.
He had told me we would ride together here and there, because back then you wouldn't ride with a rookie officer. You would ride with the senior officer, sometimes a trainer, just to keep that going. So I would ride with him here and there because, like I said, he was goofy. So he would play all kinds of roles, and man, it was like it was just, I was this punching bag or whatever it was. It was like that's who he was inside the car. Like, we would just laugh. And then the first day, he sends me a message. He's like, "Hey, meet me over here off of 30 in Winslow." I'm like, okay. I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, I got a new guy. And I'm like, okay. And I go over there and pull up, and I look at the door, and I'm like, oh, I see Justin. And then he looks at me. He's just nods his head. And I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? So, Justin's on training, and I'm like, I guess that means I shouldn't say anything. So I just stay there. And like you guys said, he was waiting, and he was trying to make sure that he messed it up. And then after the fact, we would sit there and just laugh at him and be like, and he's like,
so you,
yeah,
you partake in, yeah,
yeah, no, because I was like, there's got to be something behind, what he's saying. And it was like, just let him mess up. And then he would ask me, like, and I'm fresh. I'm not, I think I was on maybe about a year and a half on. I'm like, dude, I'm getting in myself. So, but at the same time, like I said, it was just part of who Jose was.
Oh yeah. Jose's a good guy. He is a goofball. He's a huge goofball. During academy, he sit up in the front row of the veranda, and it was like the first week that Rick Perez, he was our class coordinator, and he had everybody stand up and tell them something about themselves. And Jose said, his nickname was Ho. He said his nickname was Hose, and then he said. He kind of goes, well, my wife calls me that, but I'm not going to tell you why. And of course, it was pretty hilarious in the academy.
Yep,
but
that was him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when did y'all actually partner up?
I want to say right after he got off of training.
Oh man, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because like I said, he had to ride with senior officers and stuff like that, and then he rode with a couple people. And then I was just riding by myself here and there. And then I know I rode with Kent, so I was just going back and forth. So I got experience with a lot of different officers from when I got off of training because you had so much experience out there. I rode with Strauss.
Yeah.
I rode with a bunch of people. So I did take a lot from their experience, a lot of the guys that were there during that time, Woody. What my first phase trainer was Mike Mata.
Oh wow,
so
okay.
He was my first phase, and that in itself was a whole roller coaster, just depending on what day it was with Mike. But I did learn a lot with him, and then after that, it was became having a good time. But
and then once y'all got together, that really kind of kicked off. In a true partnership. Friendship.
We did. We like I said, we were friends. We knew each other. And what's the best thing to do is to ride with your good friend. And you're young. I started when I was 21. By that time, maybe I was like 23. And we were running and gunning like everybody does. So we were excited to get out there and just see what we can get into every day.
What did y'all most like to get into?
So for the most part, and I'll tell you just on the little T part is Junior was in the 10s at the time, actually, which is South Dallas over there on the other side of Fair Park. And so I was actually in the 20s. So on my little T, similar to what he's saying, I actually rode with Tommy Carroll and those guys, Arnott and
Meltebarger?
Meltebarger, yeah, and Hertel and those guys over there. And spent a lot of time over on East Side. And, really they just showed me the ropes over there. But yeah, I rode with them in the 20s and learned. That's really where I learned a lot about the Grove itself, other than training, of course, like the Grove itself, not Deep Grove or anything like that. And so then as soon as I got off Little T, I think I tried to partner up. And we were, of course, back then we had the Grants and Hallbrook and those guys as sergeants. Mm-hmm. So you can go up to them any day and ask if you would ride. And so I'd ride over there with Junior in the 10s. I didn't really care for that geography over there too much, but I enjoyed the partnership, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah, we rode in the 10s. I try to avoid the 20s because that was a lot of that is where I went to school.
Yeah.
My parents still live out there in the Grove. A lot of my family's out there, so I try to, as much, avoid that area, just to encounter people that But at the same time, we got used to it. But anything else around it, I kind of rode around in the Deep Grove and in South Dallas, but primarily like in the 10s and 30s back in the days when it was still the Cliff.
Yeah, well, we've always referred to it as the Grove, but it's actually Pleasant Grove is what it's known as. And when your parents grew up there, hell, it probably was very pleasant because I have some of my stepbrother, his family grew up over there off Bruton, and it was very nice at one time.
Oh yeah, it was. Like I said, it's a good part of town. A lot of people give it a misconception of what it is, but growing up, we didn't know any better. I was a first generation Mexican American here with my parents coming in from Mexico. And all my family was from Mexico, so that's all we knew. All we knew was the Grove. Everybody kind of lived in that specific area, so that's all we knew growing up. And to us, that was home. And to this point, it still is. So when I take my family out there, they see it, and it's become their home. They've gotten used to it. Compared to what people hear, it's a great place to live. But like I said, it's so big, different people, different areas. Like I said, we have very demographics that are large.
There's everything
out there. So it's a good place for people to grow up, and it's changed. Just like everything in Dallas has changed. But yeah, we rode out there in the Grove. Like I said, we have the Northern Grove, which is closer to to Jim Miller going towards 30. And then you have the southern part, or the mid-grove, which is going to be your Buckner, Lake June area.
Yeah.
And then you have your southern part, which is closer to 175, Elam and that part. So
that's where it gets a little hairy out there. You're
Yeah,
heading
it's-
towards
the
there's
station.
a lot of wild characters out there on that.
The station that's true. You wouldn't think it, right? But it's
Yeah.
all around the station right there. Woodland City and all that stuff back
Oh
then.
my,
Yeah.
yeah, dude. Man. There's some
Absolutely.
Woodbine there behind. Yeah, there's some.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of s-holes out there. The pockets of crime. There's a lot of violence all over the city, but just like South Dallas is pretty rough, but parts of the Grove you never get calls to.
Absolutely. They
Yeah.
handle their own problems. I will say when I came on, I really wasn't a confrontational person or anything like that. So I really didn't know what I was getting into going to Southeast. But it all worked out. It was actually a great place to be a police officer because you experienced everything. So not just one thing, not just dope or this or that, but you actually experienced everything. And you really learned that there were good people amongst the criminal element, and so it made a difference. Kind of like what Junior's talking about his family, those families living there and stuff like that. Because if you just watch the news, you wouldn't understand those good people live there. And there are a ton of good people. I went to a family funeral in 2008, and one of my grandma's sisters had passed away. And while we were there, we were talking, and they knew I was a police officer over in the Grove. And her sister, who probably was about 75 at the time, had mentioned that her and her husband lived over there. I don't know if it's Crestshire, but the road behind, what's the road over there, Bruton and Buckner, or Town Row? Or
Old Town Road. Oh,
Old
man.
Town. So the next
Aspen and
street right behind
Road.
Old Town Row, and
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it. You got this 75-year-old couple been living here 40 years, and but they're really surrounded by issues, and you just felt so bad for them. But they knew it as Pleasant Grove, like you mentioned, though. That's what they knew it as.
Yeah, and that's anywhere in Dallas. There's in the most crime-ridden parts of Dallas, there are people that are generational. They live there their entire life. Their families live there their entire life, and they don't know any better. And some of them can't get out, and they're the ones who call 911 for us to come help them.
Absolutely.
And they have to. They basically every neighborhood has these neighborhood terrorists, basically, that are they're just terrorizing the neighborhood and those people. And yeah, that's you look at the drug house calls, you look at the random gunfire calls, and it's usually the people that are out crying for us to come do something.
From the outside looking at you guys, you didn't chase stolen cars. You didn't chase dope. You weren't looking for accidents or DWIs, but you guys did everything. And it was one of those cars that when they showed up, you knew, okay, I've got some serious guys here that are going to be able to help me with whatever it is going on. And like you said, you experienced the drugs, you experienced the stolen cars. You guys did everything, and you didn't shy away from any types of calls. You took whatever came across. You guys handled everything. It was a really well-rounded partnership that you guys had. I tried to jump in every time one of you guys took a day off, or if you had staggered days off, I was like, I'm going to ride with one of those guys because it was just fun. We would do anything that came across, and there was no, hey, we got to go check this house. We got to go find this car. We got to go. It was just whatever's coming our way is exactly what we're going to take on, and that was kind of y'all's reputation out there.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Your reputation was just two solid dudes that were partners, and you could count on them if you were calling for cover and they showed up. You didn't have to, like, sometimes you call for cover and you hear somebody answer up and you're like, send more, but you guys were not that. Y'all had a very good reputation of being very solid officers.
Yeah, and I think it's all about the people that we work with. You had your dope chasers, you had this and that, people that did accidents, and at the end of the day, you learn from them. And then when we partnered up, it was more of like, hey, you know what? Whatever comes our way, it's what we're going to get. Are we going to go to jail 2 to 3 times a day? Are we going to go, find a DWI? There weren't too many of those, and, they weren't the biggest thing. But at the same time, whatever happened, we were there because I think it made our day go faster. And I think with Southeast, it is what it is. Over there, it's always busy, so you have the luck of the draw. And back then, Stan would kind of help you out. He was there and it was like, hey, he knew who the workers were, and he knew what type of calls needed to be taken care of. And, it was just part of that we were able to kind of learn every aspect of it. And when we partnered up, that's what it was. It was, let's see what we can get into. And that was kind of like every day we get in. All right, ready? Yeah. What's out there?
Yeah, I think the only unspoken rule in our car, and Junior and I knew it, was that whenever we got in the car, he drove and I did paperwork. So my first day off, or on Little T, I rode with one of his classmates, Hellengard. And
Justin, that's Danny's one of the partners here, T.
And I was sitting southbound Jim Miller right at Lake June, red light, and an assist comes out over off Loop 12. And I clear the intersection with him in my car, and I go through it and get T-boned. And so I felt so bad because it was his classmate, and I won't go through it, but a couple of years later, I was riding with Blanchard, another one of his classmates, and T-boned a car on Buckner. So we always understood that it was better off if Junior drove and I did the paperwork. So.
Yeah, I feel a lot safer when I drive, because it's funny because when I wasn't there, and then the next day he'll call me, hey, guess what happened? Like, what happened? I got a broken foot. I was in a wreck, and I was like, oh, what? I take a day off, and this is what happened. So. Yeah, no, it became one of those things where, and then too, the navigation part for me, growing up in the Grove, I actually kind of knew a lot of the streets, a lot of the back alleys, where people were going. So it really helped me out. A lot of people say, well, why would you go back and work in the area that you lived in? For me, it was the geography. It was really, really simple for me, getting around and knowing certain areas. So if we need to get there fast, I knew how to get there.
No, the geography is man, it is one of the most important things whenever you get out there as a rookie in an area that most people don't even know where they don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
We talked about the violence of Dallas and especially the Grove. I want to take y'all back to March 17, 2009. I got involved in that whole incident a little bit later that night. But I want you to, kind of paint a picture for the listener of when y'all got involved and how it kind of unfolded.
Yeah, I'll try to do my best. I'll be honest, as over the years, I think I've talked to Junior about it a couple of times, but I really haven't, told that story too much. And I know, Joe, you've tried to get me on here to tell that story a little bit. And I just want to start with, first of all, is thank you guys for the work you do. But I really had pushed you off and brushed you off on that story until I went to that Brotherhood event a couple months ago, and I heard that sheriff tell his story, their speaker there. And it just really, it kind of spoke to me, and I think in that moment, and nothing else had spoke to me and wanted me to tell my story till then, or the story of that night that we had. But so March 17th, 2009, for us was just like any other day out there. We were, I think, working the 30s. And Junior and I were partners that night, and one night we all both happened to be at work, and we actually started the night out. It was probably about 9 o'clock, and we were covering Quiros, Horacio, over on an accident right there at 175 and Loop 12. And so we were over there, and I think, and Junior, you can clarify, maybe Martin was over there. And
yeah, it was, right across the store there. So Q took Horacio took the call. And he was working the accident, and then Martin showed up, Dave showed up, and then we were just there, just working the accident before the record was getting there. But again, it was just a typical day that, hey, what else can we get into? And that popped off real quick after the accident.
Yeah, so we had a good crew there just working the accident, right, just like Southeast Third Watch. And so then a home invasion call comes out, and came out at 733 Cliffview, which for anybody that's worked that area, it's a trailer park just on the south side of 175 there. And literally from where we were, it's just about 30 seconds down the road to the east or the south where we were at. So I think Martin and Dave had just hauled butt down there, Code 3, to get there. And then when they got there, they kind of put it out that it's still going on. And, obviously, and so Junior and I headed that way and left Q at the accident. And so we drove there. It probably took us a matter of maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. And upon entering that trailer park, it's similar to like a lot of stuff numbered in the Grove, like apartment stuff like that. Nothing is easily numbered, right? So you may see trailer 1 here and then trailer 100 right next to it or something weird like that. And so when we entered, we knew that Martin and Dave were there. We just didn't know where they were at. We didn't know that trailer. And I think it was trailer maybe 70. And so we drove through the trailer park, and we actually drove all the way through the back of the trailer park. And we ended up, they were still there and telling us. And so we ended up turning around, coming back, and we ultimately saw them. And it happened to be the first street in the trailer park. And they were all the way down at the end of the street. And so what had happened is Martin had come in, and pure training is what it was. So Martin had come in, Dave had come in, and Dave had initially just gone to the back, and Martin had gone to the front. So really setting up that 2-man perimeter before anybody else arrived. So the only news we had is from Stan, the dispatch back then. Everybody would know him. Was really that it was a home invasion robbery. All we knew is that somebody was inside the home, a family was inside the home, and also the robber had forced his way in. So we really had limited information there.
Yeah, so when we got the call, like I said, it didn't take us a lot to get there. We were on top of that. And then Martin and Dave were already there. As we were getting there, the dispatcher, Stan, kept on giving us information. So when we pull up, we see Martin's car and Dave's car, and then information that there was a child or a young teenage son, about 10 to 13 years old, had slipped out the window. So the information was that he was in there when they came in, and he was able to get out the window. As we all know, we get those situations where we do get information and it's not viable sometimes. It's just like, well, it is what it is. But this time, it really, from us, when we talk about it, it was one of those where, hey, it's getting real. This is actually a good one. We all know it's going to be good. So we had the good guys there. We had the perimeter starting to set up. The young child was a Spanish speaker. So literally I went over there. There were about 2 to 3 houses or trailers down. And I went over there and talked to him, kind of tried to get the information, put it out, actually kind of find out we were on the wrong trailer. So it wasn't the far end trailer. It was the second to the last. So I relayed that information to the guys out there, because there was only 4 of us right there, to try to get in. I said, hey, he is very confident that the guy is in there. And he's saying his uncle's there, his dad's in there, his mom, and 2 kids. And he is inside. And one thing that I can remember from the young kid was, they're in there and they're going to hurt my parents. So that in itself took a seriousness. It was, well, we need to figure out what we need to do going forward. Let's get in the right trailer. So during that information, I put it out. We got cover coming, and it happened so fast. And I think you can kind of talk about after the fact what happened going forward.
Real quick, just summarizing what we have so far. You're saying you had a 10-year-old slip out of the trailer, and there's at least one suspect or more?
So what he told us, what he told me, there was one suspect in there with a gun. So right at that time, we only knew that there was one suspect inside the trailer.
Okay, so you have a 10-year-old, and then you have a suspect inside with potential family members as hostages.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so is it the reason y'all went to the wrong trailer is because he slipped out? Did he go to a neighbor's trailer and they called 911?
Yeah, he went to. That's where they called 911 from, and they were all Spanish speakers.
Okay.
Everybody that lived there. So from the information that we got, was that it was the far end one, but the numbers were off. And again, it was nighttime.
Yeah.
So we could only see so much, and a lot of these did not have numbers that reflect or anything. It was more they're written down on the side of the actual trailer. In this
Cliffview, this trailer park community, it sets off 175 pretty good ways. I mean, there's like a field, and it's kind of tucked away by itself. And if I remember right, the entire community, it is Latino. There's a lot of Latino community.
Big Latino community there, all Hispanics, Spanish speaking. So, like I said, the information was to, and I think once we talk a little bit more, I think that was the reason behind it, that the individual kind of picked them out and followed them there.
So Martin and Dave are holding perimeter on this. Do you think suspects knew that you guys were there? You said you're going code 3, but did you shut it down before then and have a stealth approach on it?
Yeah, we shut it down. Typically, when we know we're in the area, we would shut it down. So we did shut it down. They had no idea. He had no idea that we were out there. He did. He was surprised as much as we were.
You're talking about the suspect.
The suspect, yes.
Yeah, and I think when we initially showed up, we contacted Martin, who was out front. So it was the last trailer is what we believed it was. So we contacted Martin. That's when Junior went to translate. A couple trailers down, speak to the son. But talking to Martin, he let us know where Dave was. And so I initially just went back with Dave. And so believing it was the last trailer. So the suspect had no clue we were there at all, because nobody was around, obviously, when he went inside the door. But so when we went in, went to the back, believing it was the last trailer. I set up on the immediate rear of the trailer number 70, actually. We believed it was 71 on the end. So I leaned up against that back wall of 70, watching the back door. You know how trailers are. They all have that side door, thinking I was covering that side door. And so we were just waiting for information at that point. We didn't know. We didn't hear anything, no yelling, nothing like that. Just waiting for information. And so at that point, I think Junior came over the radio. He tried to give some information. Back then, we had the mics. It was a little tough to where we were at. And we're from my angle, really, I was there probably a matter of seconds, in honesty, leaning against that back door. And if you've ever been in one of those Grove trailers, probably like a lot of others, but that back room is kind of like the master bedroom. And so on the back side of that master bedroom is the elegant side of that trailer, which is that garden tub and kind of a hot tub. I think Junior described it the other day as like a jacuzzi tub or something like that, right? But so I was kind of leaning up against that, and within a couple of seconds, just heard gunshots on the other side of that wall. And so, obviously it felt like it was right there next to me. And so at that point, I think Junior may have tried to tell us over the radio it was the second trailer. I don't think that came across to any of us, me, Dave, or Martin out there. We were still set up on that first trailer. So when I heard those gunshots, I obviously I said shots fired. And so I notified Stan, who, notified us. But everything happened so quick, it just didn't make a difference. So the only thing I could do was try to gain distance on that wall because I knew the shots were coming from inside that wall. And so I didn't know what was going on, but, obviously I'd later find out. But
yeah, so when I was getting the information and I was putting it on the radio, right at that exact time is when the shots were fired inside. So we were still outside.
Could you hear the shots?
Yeah, so I was like 2 downs, but I was walking towards Martin to signal him that it's going to be this one. So Martin moves closer to this one. He sees me. And then as I'm walking towards the front, that's when Justin's like, hey, shots fired. But we could hear the way it was sounding, that it was inside. So we knew something was happening inside, and we had to get in there. So as Martin is on the other side where you said the field is, he was right there because there's really not too much cover. I'm walking that way, and I think Lucas Flores had gotten there, and his rookie, Wortham, they were trying to go towards the trailer on the other side too to help set up the perimeter. But as I'm walking and towards the trailer at the same time, I said it's hard to explain because it happened right at the exact same time, where boom, 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 shots fired inside. We're trying to figure out what we're gonna do. I look at Martin, and it was dark, and I just look to my left. I see Martin getting up, and his gun goes up. And I haven't gotten around to the front of the side to see what he's looking at because that's his view. And then as I'm going over there, all I see is Martin yelling at the guy, Dallas police, let me see your hands. The dude, I think, just right where as I hear Martin saying that, just starts popping rounds towards him. So I'm like, I duck back towards the other side, and then he starts running. Martin runs right after him, and I'm running on the opposite side of the trailer to try to cut him off.
Paralleling
okay. On the side. And again, this happened so quick, and then that's when he didn't realize where he was running into, and then Justin himself didn't know what was coming towards him.
Yeah, so after those shots, the guy ran down the stairs of that porch and then ran to the back, and so that's when Martin was following him, and I think Junior was paralleling him on the other side. But yeah, so I just remember so quick that I was still trying to gain cover from the back wall. And so as I was trying to gain cover, there was a little storage shed that was in the yard behind us. There's no fence into the next street of trailers or anything. And so I was just trying to get behind that, flimsy shed to gain cover from any shots that may be coming. And as I was trying to gain cover, you heard those shots. And before I knew it was pitch dark back there. Maybe there was a porch light or something like that from the trailer. But, I mean, it was dark, and so you really couldn't see much there. And as I was turned, running to get behind that shed, something brushed my shoulder. And so really there should have been nothing there, so nothing should have touched me. But as I turned, a silhouette was running away. And it was almost at this point just probably about 10, 15 feet apart. And I think I realized at that point, and just so you know, none of this is like planned out, right? When I say I realized it, I think just your body, it goes into that tunnel vision. And so you realize there's a silhouette there, and it's almost like a threat facing you. And so as I turned towards it, obviously I had my gun out, and the silhouette turned towards me, pointing something towards me. And I never understood in the night, obviously, why this happened, but I heard just pow, 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 gunshots coming at me. And so obviously my body just instinctively reacts and fires multiple shots at that individual, the silhouette at the point, and he falls to the ground. And so it happened to be that was the individual that came down the stairs, obviously a suspect out of the trailer that was shooting at Martin him out front. And so when he fell to the ground, I think I was probably in shock a little bit. Of course, we had plenty of cover there, and within seconds, I mean, we had, you had Izagari, you had Martin, you had Junior had come around, you had other officers that were there to come around and take him into custody. And he didn't just give up. I mean, he still fought them. I mean, he had been shot multiple times, but he was still fighting those officers there. Yeah,
so I want to get back to when you feel something brush you. You literally hit shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, shoulder to shoulder. So I was running away from the trailer to gain cover. So his right shoulder hit my left shoulder, the back of my left shoulder, and
it almost spun you. Yeah,
Yeah, it almost spun both of us actually, and I learned that later in trial. But yeah, I mean, he was as shocked as I was to find me there. I think he knew that when he came down the stairs and he shot at Martin, he knew they were there, but I don't think he expected anybody else. And I'll tell you, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I'll tell you, it's complete training. We had been out maybe 4 or 5 years, but the tactics and stuff like that they train you, you're in the academy class, you understand it, or, that annual training. But that training that night solved a lot of things that night, probably saved our lives and some other lives too. And so I think it really paid off there, because if we hadn't been there, he would have been gone. He wasn't a slow individual. The only thing that slowed him and dropped him that night were the gunshots.
Yeah, so he was surprised to see us in the front. So as I'm going through the parallel through the side, and we all know the trailers aren't as big as we can kind of think. They're probably, I don't know how many feet, but as I now remember that night, as I was running, it was, he just shot at us. We're running, but at the same time, it slowed down where I'm like, Justin's in the back. And then as I'm running and going towards the back, now it's more of a, and then right at that time, I hear the shots fired. So I'm thinking Justin's been shot, because this guy's already shot at us once. He's coming around the corner, and now I'm going to engage him. As I come around the corner, you can just smell all the powder, all the gunpowder just in the air, because shots were fired. So I'm walking in through there, and I come around, and then like he said, when he took those shots at him, he went down, and it was after that was just dogpile trying to figure out, trying to see what he had on him.
Yeah, when I rounded the corner, I was at the station and I was putting my equipment away. I was getting ready to leave, and this came out, and I heard Martin. I heard y'all out there. I heard Martin was out there. He's a friend of mine, and I'm hauling ass out there. And as I get there, as I round the corner, I see it's pitch dark, but all you can see is flashlights fumbling around. Somebody had dropped their flashlight, so it was kind of backlighting a little bit, but I saw this guy. You were trying to get him cuffed, and he was fighting. And I saw a gunshot wound to the shin. It looked like to his calf. But yeah, he was still actively fighting when I ran around there, and we finally got him in the cuffs. And then at that point, you're just kind of like trying to slow everything down and secure the scene. We actually want to play some audio from it's actually from your dash cam of that night, and we're just going to let the listener kind of hear that. The audio isn't the best because this is from 2009, so just keep in mind that this is old body mics, and this is from y'all's dash cam.
Yeah, and I think back then the body cams, you'd wear it. One guy in the car would wear it, and if you got more than 30 feet away from the car, it'd break up. So yeah.
Call the 51, okay? State family visiting the lot. State chief was reporting that individuals inside a lot with individuals with a gun. Believes possibly burglary in progress. I'm gonna shut it off right here, okay? You got it?
It's in your box.
Remember, Mike's still going. Lot 51.
What's the lot number again? Lot 51. So is it a female unit the one that had it?
Foxtrot 336, we're at the trailer home right now.
356, 10-4.
It's gonna be 51, so
321, I'm out.
I'll go, let's see him. What are we looking for? 51.
10-4,
51? Go back. He's already up.
Is it back?
No, he's gonna be out here somewhere so we can see him. He's gonna be on the front, one of the front two rows. No, it's right here. I'm gonna go to the back, okay? I'm gonna go to the back.
Hey, Dave. Bowen's gonna go back there with you. 354. Alright, 354. We can pull him a black man right side. Hold him in with every day. I'm at the rear location. We got first entrance on the left-hand side. The blue trailer. 10-4. That's recording show now. Be advised, you got shots and then fired. Everybody stand by. Here's reported shots fired. 336, we got shots fired towards the back of the trailer.
Need a second from the end.
You're just gonna have to continue code 3. We got shots fired at the back of the trailer. Shots coming from inside towards you, officers. That's fired. Anybody else close? Head that way. Charlie 336. The shot fired. Fired. Right now. Okay, you got shots fired. You got suspect in custody, say? Charlie 336. You say you got suspect in custody? You hold the perimeter. You hold the perimeter units, that's all I got. We got one in custody. Hold the perimeter. The one in custody, everybody hold the perimeter.
Get again. Under the bed. Under the bed. Get up. Quit.
Okay, 10-4. Charlie 322 copy. Supervisor, PES, Capers. Okay. Are any of the officers involved in this? Or was it? Negative, no officer involved. Okay. The DFT's already around. SARS should be code 6 out there. And I'll get you PES and I need a phone number for somebody for Capers.
Right behind that little doors right here, okay? Okay. And in between that and back. Oh, we got the gun. They got the gun. Junior, is he shot? Thank you. Come on. I'm taking the car.
I'll get you what's going on here right now. No, that's Juan. I've got plenty of cover out there right now, but thanks. I think.
Dude. You all right, dude? Ain't hitting nowhere? Sure. I'm sure I would have felt it. He ran right by me, bumped right into me, dude.
310.
We exchanged fire still.
Help out there. How you so far?
Oh, man. What's up, man?
Hey, whose car are you going to?
I'm going to my car.
Okay.
Is he
How many shots? I don't know.
Man, I don't know. I probably fired off 5 times because he turned around and started shooting. Because he ran out the back of the house, right?
You got all your shit?
How much you got? You got your room?
I
Yeah, I got
pull
it.
the car up here and I just fucking sit in there and wait. Who do you want to be your officer?
You got to get your commanding officer.
Hey, who do you need to have
You got somebody you know? I'll do it. He'll do it because my partner's in there, so.
Okay.
Hey,
I
you
just
good?
move his car
We'll
up
just pull your car up.
Get everybody.
Here.
Go ahead and pull your belt off.
Yeah. You alright, dude? Dude. Fuck, dude. I don't know what to talk about, man. Do you know how close that is? Yeah. He bumped into me. He didn't know who he was bumping into. He turned around and knew it was me, dude. Once he called police, he fired a couple rounds and there. Did you? No, we're 6192, I think. We're up here. This is us right here. Hey, Bacon, do me a favor before you. Well, never mind, whatever, dude. They're gonna have to move. Tell them they're gonna have to move some of these cars.
Some of the cars moved out there so that the ambulance can move through.
Our microphone's on. We're on. They're on the whole time. It's still on, okay, so you know. Gotcha. Call, do me a favor. What do you need? Call Sergeant Grant and tell him the microphone's on. You're my companion officer. We're in the car. There's fire shots. Can we turn it off? The microphone.
Right, 340,
I left mine in the car.
310, I'm logged on en route. 4 Sergeant.
I'll ask Sergeant if he'll come down here. Let's call him right now, bro. Okay, that's Sergeant. Is his brother on his out here? Yeah, his brother's coming. Okay. Thanks a lot, man.
So Justin, this video we're listening to, I just want to give an idea for what the listener is hearing. So this is a dash cam video inside the squad car. A lot of the audio we are hearing is it picking up the police radio that is inside the car. Now you're wearing a body mic on your person, so initially it's picking up your conversation in the car as you're driving to the location. Once you get to the location, you're getting out of the car, and because of that distance from your car, the camera is no longer able to pick up your microphone. So intermittently throughout this recording, we are periodically hearing you come over as that signal's reestablished, and we can get bits and pieces of that off your body microphone as you're still in the situation. But majority of this is the audio from the police radio.
Yeah, that's correct. I think back then, even if you watched dash cam, I don't even know if there was audio unless you had that body mic on. So yeah, and the further you got away from the squad car, obviously the worse the signal to that body cam was, or that body mic was at. So.
And y'all were several trailers down, right, from where you parked?
Yeah, we were probably about 3 or 4 trailers down.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I was on the back side of those trailers too. So yeah.
So can the listener just kind of heard about the shooting you described. You could actually hear you going to the back, Martin telling dispatch that you're going to the back, and then you hear everything kind of unfolding, and you hear you talking to the junior in the shooting. So, and even after the fact, you're walking back to the car. And for the listeners that are non-police, after you get into a shooting, you have an officer that stays with you, and it's called a companion officer, right? Can you talk about?
Yeah, and generally in a situation like this or any critical incident I would have been in, my companion officer obviously would have been my partner, right, if he wasn't in it with me, just because we were such good friends, and that's the one I would have trusted with that. But naturally, the Southeast Third Watch back then is any of those guys could have been my companion officer. I mean, we all were close-knit. We all had great relationships. But at this scene, when I came out of that trailer, and since I had been involved in it, then I needed to isolate myself. And so the person that was right there for me actually happened to be Matt Bacon. And so he was just another third watch officer. We worked together a number of times and rode together, but he was more than willing to step up and sit in that car with me and just kind of guide me through whatever I needed at that moment, and help me out.
Okay. And then you still had such an active scene because you hear the gunshots inside the trailer, and y'all have the shooting on the outside of the trailer. You have to make entry into that trailer to check for any loss of life or anybody that's seriously injured, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was chaotic in the back. I mean, obviously it took a minute to get the guy into custody, but it was chaotic. And so I think at that point, and I'll let Junior go into more detail, he has more information on the search of the trailer. I followed him in and went to one side of it, but I'll let him go into a little bit more detail on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so back then the audio is what we have. So, and just this week, me and Justin were going over it, and I've never seen the video. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know the audio existed. So hearing it brings back, I guess, the night and kind of puts into perspective exactly how serious it was. So once that happens, I go next to Justin to make sure he's not shot. And then, like I said, it's so chaotic. We have so much going on, and then we realize there's victims inside. Next, we go in there, make entry, see what we can do. We go up the small little stairs that each trailer has because it's above. So we're trying to get in. It's,
who went in with you?
So Bronco McCoy was in front. I was second. And then I don't remember how the stack was. But we're trying to open the trailer. It appeared that it was locked. So we're trying to pry, we're trying to go, but we could feel tension from inside. As the tension was going back and forth, at one time we swung it and it opened. As it opened, we encountered a female, which could be the adult female, which was the wife, and the kids. Like I was telling Justin, when we opened it at the same time and they saw us, they didn't recognize who we were. All they thought that it was another bad guy coming in. They ran right through us. And then there was a small pickup truck, and I guess that was their truck. They jumped on it, and they did not want to be, and you could hear it in the audio. They're very, and it happened real quick. Like I said, at that time, once that door opened, they came out. They went towards the truck. We went in. So me and Bronco go inside. And the trailer's not too big, so we make a left. Right when we go inside, make a left, we encounter, which we later found out was the uncle. His hands, I believe, were tied, and he was on the floor, but there was a pool of blood all over, so we knew just going by that, he was already gone. So we make that decision to move forward towards the back where we said the shots were coming from. We clear right, and then we clear left, and we see an individual that's in the back where Justin heard the shots. He put him in the bathtub. So this individual was still trying to get the money or whatever he wanted to get from this individual, and he basically executed him in the bathtub. But it was big. It was like the jacuzzi style, big one. But when we approached him, he was still breathing. He had one gunshot to his cheek area, and then he had one in the chest. So Bronco and myself, Bronco's like, we're going to do CPR. And I think on the audio you can hear where he says, we're going to start CPR. I ask him, what do you need? He goes, give me some towels, because he was bleeding from his mouth. So I grabbed, right next to it, there was some, above the restroom, there were some towels. I don't know how many towels. I just grabbed as many towels as we can, and we're going. He's cleaning his mouth, doing CPR. I'm pumping. So we're there, and then we're cleaning him off. And we go through, he was bleeding so much that we go through so many of those big towels, and I'm talking about the
bath towels. Yeah.
Big bath towels. So we're doing, and I'm pumping, and we're going, and we're talking to him. I'm talking to him in Spanish. He's trying to talk to us, but there was so much blood that was going. We're trying our best. We're trying to get DFR there to see what they can do. But we're going, and the incredible thing is Bronco. Bronco was Bronco. He was not going to let this guy just go on his own. So we kept on. I don't know how long we continued. And he kept on going. I mean, the guy was bleeding. There's blood everywhere. And we're doing what we can as the officers come in there. They see us doing that. They kind of give us room because it's not big. So, we really don't fit all in there. And we're in this bathtub trying to help him out. But then, I mean, after so much that we could do, he just gave up. He passed away there. In the tub, and then me and Bronco kind of looked at each other, and I mean we did what we could, and then we walked out, going towards the outside, but at that time, even as much as the time that we were in the bathroom in the back, going towards the front, that family did not want to get out of that truck. I think it was their safe zone.
They were shocked.
They were in so much shock. I remember Flores was there trying to get him down. And then when I started talking to him in Spanish, trying to get him down, but there was they didn't want to be touched. They didn't want to be
They were in the bed of the truck, right?
In the bed of the truck, just standing up. And I mean, I know emotions were high. They just seen what had happened. And it's understandable. But it was a very different scene that I had ever seen because of just the emotion and there was no calming them down. There was no trying to help them. They were just very scared.
Well, you went through a lot of, you just talked about going through all the emotions. You responded to a call. You have some of your friends getting shot at. You think that your partner could have gotten shot. Your partner shoots somebody. And then you have to go in and you have to start doing life-saving measures to people that, they didn't have much chance. And then they expire, and then you're having to wrestle with that. Mm-hmm. That is a lot to process in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, the thing that really stands out to me is the two ones are, Justin, when you were telling the story, how quick everything was. I mean, it really is, rather than processing, it's almost reflexive because it happens in a matter of seconds. As soon as shots go off or something else comes in, the next thing's already happening and you're having to respond. And then on top of that, you're in a shooting and you don't have time necessarily to process all that and deal with that. Instead, the scene's still rolling and guys are still active and there's still a problem to be solved. So there's a lot going on in that scenario.
Yeah, so after that, once I guess we can say calm down because DFR started showing up, I was still on the side of the trailer and I let DFR know what we did and see if maybe they can bring him back. They went inside, and I don't remember if they took the guy in the back, the dad. But I went to sit in the car to try to,
decompress.
Decompress, trying to, I guess, just figure out what happened. But at the same time, I think I was there with Kuros. But again, like Justin's saying, I mean, there's so many officers out there, and everybody kind of took a role in what they did. If it was perimeter, if it was evidence collecting, if it was the bad guy going to the hospital in the ambulance, if it was trying to gather information from inside outside, we kind of got away from the scene to sit down and figure out what the next process is. Because as everybody knows, once you're involved in an officer-involved shooting, there's still a long time to go. I think I got a chance to contact my wife, and I told her, hey, I'm good. This is what happened. This is what, and again, we were young in our relationship. She kind of was like, okay, cool, just another day. But at the same time, kind of let her know. She was actually at the hospital with my brother-in-law because he was having his first child. So all that's going on. And then, like I said, once the SIU gets there, then it becomes, I just told her, hey, I'm going to be home late. It's going to be a long, long night. And that's where kind of the next step went.
Yeah, and I would almost tell you that, thinking about it over the years, is the reality is coming up in Southeast, it probably prepared for all of us that were out at that scene that night to, like Canetti mentioned, is just to instinctively react, right? I mean, you didn't have to have a sergeant or somebody there telling you, you go to the back, you go here, you go inside, you search, you do CPR. When you look at it, I mean, we probably in our career just responded to so many critical incidents where our partners, our colleagues were involved in, that, that night, March 17th, 2009, in all honesty, our number got called. And, we couldn't have asked for a better crew of people there. And that's one thing I've, religiously over the years said. And, anytime I've thought about it or, talked to Junior about it really, because he's really the only person I really talk about it to, is that I wouldn't have wanted anybody else there other than Martin and Dave and Junior and I. I mean, the way we reacted, I mean, initially, of course, and of course everybody supported or showed up. But yeah, and so I was just so proud of the way we all reacted and, to it.
You've mentioned 3 officers in this story that are no longer with us. Kuros, Matt Bankin, and Bronco McCoy.
Yeah. So, when Joe and I talked about doing this, and I mentioned that, obviously I had some audio from it, and I sat down at home and I was in the office by myself because I just wanted to go through it, before I, shared it with Joe and you guys and everything. And because, I had, come across it years ago, and I, in all honesty, had packed it away. And I probably packed this whole story away, right? Packed the audio away with it. And so I sat down there and I thought it was audio. I literally thought it was just radio dispatch, and then it comes out it's a video. And so I watched that video in my office at home by myself, and it just broke my heart. And so it broke my heart. One is because you relived the incident, but we were all okay out there that night. And so, we all went home to our families like we want to do every night. And so, but really what broke my heart on that is just watching it and experiencing it and hearing the voices, because you can't see all those faces. And as a matter of fact, you won't see any of the faces really of those officers. But, we started that night out, that call out with Kuros on that accident. And we covered Kuros 1,000 times, and we were a 2-man, and Kuros sometimes a 2-man and sometimes a 1-man, but we would eat lunch and we would do all those things together. We worked together. And then Bronco McCoy inside that trailer, and Bronco was the nicest guy you'll ever meet. And like Junior mentioned, is Bronco didn't know those people in that trailer. And, a lot of officers may have looked at that guy and, based on experience and said, I think this guy's gonna go, he's not gonna make it. It's his time. And they may not have leaned down there in that tub or climbed down there, and gotten dirty like that and tried to save that guy's life. But Bronco and Junior did that, and they didn't know that guy. And then, as my companion officer, Bacon didn't hesitate to get in that car, and sit down with me. And, it breaks my heart really knowing, Bacon's story, because, what he went through. And so it really it was a tearjerker. And just tell a little story about that is, all 3 of those officers are no longer here. They're probably, sitting there in heaven looking down on us. And, but they all 3, lived their heroic lives in their own ways. And I'll be completely honest with you. We've all met officers who we said, that guy's an asshole. But I'll tell you about those 3 officers is they live by the rule that I try to live by every day, and I think Junior tries too, is you treat people the way you want to be treated. And I don't think I ever saw Kuros, Bronco, or Bacon treat somebody without respect. And I saw them take a ton of people into custody and take them to jail. But, not one of them did they ever disrespect in front of me, and they always treated them with respect, and they always treated me with respect. A little backstory really is Kuros actually passed away in 2019 on my birthday. And, it's just, you never think that would happen with regards to somebody so young. And I didn't really know it, but knowing that, these, Kuros and Bronco, for example, leaving children behind, my life, when we were in this incident, Junior had a young kid, his son was young, and, so he had, your wife to call, and you had your son to think about. Me, I guess in that instance, I was fortunate. I had nobody at home, right? I had no kids or anything like that. So,
sometimes it's worse.
Well, it could be. I think.
After an event like that, just going home and no one to talk to about it, and no one to take your mind off of it either.
Yeah, and that's true. And like Junior said, I don't think we got home until maybe 5 or 6 in the morning the next day. and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but sitting in that car with Bacon is, you know, and I can't even remember all the conversations, but the great part about it was you just wanted somebody there. And so I think they called my mom for me or whatever and broke the news and just told her I was okay, which was great. But yeah, I mean, you just wanted somebody there. So
yeah, I think as we move forward in this profession, we understand the emotions that happen, because even that night, like I said, processing everything was kind of weird. Even the next day, we didn't understand what had just happened. But again, those guys, man, Bronco, Quiros, and Bacon, man, those guys are always going to be Southeast. You know, I'm sure everywhere else there's other officers that have also, you know, encountered something like that. But I think that goes back to the brotherhood that we have, that, you know, only somebody that is an officer understands when there's a big incident like this, what happens afterwards. But again, you know, yeah, just like I said, as much as we can to try to process it. You know, your wife, your girlfriend can only understand what you do so much, and then your kids, you don't want to put them through that. But they do ask questions. You know, my son Aiden was young, so he probably doesn't even remember it, but I know my wife does. So you know, just having that support. And again, even the next day, we went, and what we thought it was just going to go have lunch the next day. We didn't go to work. You know, we took the day off, and I think that was part of our mentality, saying, hey, this is maybe something we need to do to decompress and talk about it. But it was funny because, yeah, the next day, looking back at it, we were just talking about it. It's like, hey, we just went and talked about our emotions, kind of went through it, and then moved forward, because, like I said, it was on to the next one.
Yeah, it was basically your debrief, and
Yes.
you had that lunch with Quiros,
Yes.
right? Yep.
yeah, we met up out in Arlington. I lived in Fort Worth at the time, so we met out in Arlington, and had lunch, and Junior, me, and Kuros. Yeah.
Go back to that night after everything was settled. You were with Matt in the car, and then you went and kind of was processing yourself. There was a massive crime scene that needed to be processed inside and outside of that home. Everything calms down to a crawl whenever SIU shows up and crime scene, and then you got chiefs coming out of the woodworks, and lieutenants and sergeants. Everybody's coming out there to this, an Officer Vol shooting, and you have multiple homicides. So we're kind of. I was there, and I remember thinking that it was odd that the suspect was out of place for that community in that trailer park, and I was like, he just didn't walk over here to rob these people, you know, like he's got to have a getaway car.
Yeah, because so like I said, like you said, the Sea of Hans on the north side,
Mm-hmm.
you have Prairie Creek, and then on the other side it's just woods.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that there was another part to this.
Yes, there's another part. So and I remember telling Began, who was on the back row, I told him on the radio, I said, hey, look for any car that looks, because he was running towards the back, so I kind of assumed that maybe he was running to, that's where his vehicle was. I said, look for any cars that look suspicious back there. And I go around the front, and literally right there was a white car that was tinted windows parked right in front of the trailer where this happened, right, not really far from the steps that went up into that trailer. And it was a white, I can't remember, Caprice or just, you know, shitty car with tinted windows, and it just looked out of place. Actually, the crime scene tape was taped to the passenger side of the window.
Yeah.
I walk to the passenger side and I try to look in, and it's pitch dark. It's dark out. There's hardly no lights. I walk all the way around to the driver's side, and I look through the windshield, and you could barely see somebody's jeans laid back in the seat in the passenger side. Dan Fogel, now lieutenant, he was standing at the front of the trailer, and he was holding his patrol rifle. And I remember telling Dan, I go, Dan, point your rifle at that passenger side. And I reach over and I open the driver door, and this guy's leaning back in the seat like he's sleeping, and he's sweating his ass off. He's back there and he's just sweating. Anyway, start giving him commands, and then everybody that's there snapped to action, and we ripped him out of that car. And in the floorboard and behind the driver's seat, there was like a little submachine gun, and there was a plastic glove that he had on that he laid it back. Because, I mean, literally his seat was back as far as it go on the passenger side, and the gun was just to his left behind the driver's side. And he was his partner in that.
Yeah, and I mean, just to adequately paint that picture, Joe, you're right. It had caution tape on it, and so that had to have been, I don't know, anywhere 30 minutes to an hour after we had already secured this scene and everything. I was in the car with Bacon, I remember, and I look up and there's some activity in that driveway, and sitting in the squad car, and Bacon says, "Bowen, they just found somebody in that car." And of course, we had been out there an hour almost, and I was just shocked. But yeah.
I want to talk about the examining trial. So the guy we found in the car ended up being his buddy. At the time, all we could charge with him was unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon. So I had to go to the examining trial on this guy. And I remember Rowden was sitting in there. Rowden came and watched it. And this guy, I was up on the stand, and his defense attorney came out and told the court, "Hey, give us a second. He's trying to fight me back here." It's like, oh, damn, okay. So if a guy finally comes out, and we're going through the examining trial, and the examining trial is almost just, it's a fishing expedition. It's just kind of getting some facts out. And the guy that, when I was up there testifying, this piece of garbage was like smiling and grinning and blowing kisses at me and all that. I mean, he was just a sorry individual. And we wrapped it up, and I remember leaving. But that's the kind of evil that we talked about earlier. And the guy that ran out of that trailer, his buddy, he was part of it.
Yeah, I think just knowing the story now and, doing research on that guy's criminal history, the one that was involved in our case, and the shooting inside the trailers, I mean, it was pure evil. I think that's what it is. It was pure evil and we didn't tell this, but inside, of course, it was a home invasion robbery, and the property they got, the only thing the family had to offer him was costume jewelry and a $2, and that's the only thing. So when they actually took him into custody and they searched him in the back, they found the $2 and maybe the play jewelry, but it was minimum. The family had nothing to give, and I don't even think it was a matter of where they were hiding money not to give it to him. They just had nothing. They were just trying to make it.
Can you talk about the other offenses that you had researched and that the suspect had done before that?
Yeah. So, you go and learn later, and just reading the appellate documents and stuff like that, you learn kind of the story, because, when you're in trial, you only know what you testified to, right? You don't get to hear everything. And so just hearing about, their actions inside that trailer that night. But come to find out that on March 3rd, they had gone over off Ewing. And it wasn't just this guy. It was a number of guys. I think there were 3 guys total. And so they had gone into an apartment, Hispanic apartment. They had followed a lady in an apartment there, forced their way in. And it was a lady, and her husband was in the back, and they had a couple young kids there. And so the same situation. They just went in to rob them. There were 3 suspects, and they shut all the blinds and everything. And so they point guns, and they ask for money, and of course the family tells them they don't have it, and they get minimal amount of money. But they actually point guns at the kids in that case. I mean, it was no different.
It was a baby.
Yeah, a baby. In that case, literally, I think the husband had told him that we have nothing, and he picked the baby up and put a gun to the baby in that case, and the husband was able to give him $40. But that wasn't good enough for him, because they actually left one suspect down there in that apartment while he had the family that was just hostage, basically. And the guy involved in the Cliffview incident, another guy went upstairs, and they forced their way into an apartment there where there were 3 brothers there. And the initial brother was talking to a family member from Mexico, just minding his own business. And he started fighting with the suspect, the guy involved in Cliffview, and tried to force him out when one of the brothers came out of the bathroom. And when he came out of the bathroom, he saw there was a struggle there. And so he tried to intervene. And when he intervened, he shot that guy, that brother. And I mean, there was no qualms about it, right? He just did it. He had no problems with it. And so as he continues to struggle with the first brother, another brother comes out, and he shoots that brother multiple times. And so then the original brother is still struggling with him and ends up out on the Sally, kind of right outside the apartment door there. And as they struggle, he ends up shooting and killing that brother. And it's just, the shame in that one is it was actually a daughter that was inside the apartment. There were juveniles inside that apartment too, similar to our home invasion, that went outside when she called 911, and that's where she found her dad, dead, right there. And in all, I mean, they got just small amount of money. And I think downstairs apartment, you put the gun to the baby, you got an Xbox, maybe some DVDs, but not much. And nothing definitely worthy of life, though.
Yeah, looking back at what we encountered that day at the home invasion, kind of looking back, that family, that individual, like we continue to say, it's pure evil. So what we got is that they were watching a local store, because there's known that individuals go and shop and they cash checks. One of the brothers that was killed was with his family there, and he cashed a check to buy groceries. He spent all his money on groceries, and then from there, that's where they ended up going towards the house, and that's when the individuals followed them. As we learn now, that's who they were preying on. They were preying on the Hispanic community and knowledge of them maybe having cash in their couches or in their refrigerator or something like that, and they thought there was going to be a quick lick. Well, like you said, it's crazy to find out after the fact that they did all this for $2 with the home invasion we were in. But before that, unknowns to us that they already had done it, so they were on a spree where they did not care. They would do anything, and they would kill anybody at any time if anybody encountered them. And like I said, we did not know before the fact that that's what they were up to. So just kind of going back and saying, like, man, these guys were crazy, and they were up to no good. And we were just blessed that night, to have Justin here still. But at the same time, there was individuals that lost their life for just a couple of, tangible things.
Yeah, and honestly, we know about the other incident, but God knows how many other incidents that they were involved in that no one knows about that linked them to it. So the trial, I mean, that was you had to learn a lot about in depth on that. And how long did that go? The trial?
Probably about a week and a half, maybe. I think it did go. And as a police officer, you know how it is. You testify every now and then, right? I mean, some people assume officers testify every day. But it was probably, I had testified in examination trials. But this is probably one of the first big trials, obviously, I testified into, of course. Definitely, since they were seeking the death penalty, the only one I've testified in that. But as the officer involved, you would think that, I tell people I talk to now as a detective, they're like, you lived it, right? So tell me, because I can only understand what I know, and you lived it, and you know all the facts. But even as the officer involved, you only know the part you played. You're not involved in the investigation, stuff like that, right? So you only knew what you played. So when I went and testified, I'll backtrack a little bit. So there were some things I didn't understand because I hadn't been in a critical incident like this before. I know some officers have been in multiple ones, so I didn't, like SWAT or something like that. You understand some of these, these audio visual effects, right, that occur to you. And I didn't really understand it, but I just knew that night, because I don't recall, raising the gun, pointing, looking at sights and all that stuff, right? So I didn't understand how that worked. How did my body know to react to this guy or anything? So I was really confused about that. So one of the things I did was I read that book on combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. And really, that was probably in the next week or two that I read that. And that's not because anybody told me to or anything like that. I think I was seeking answers. So I wouldn't have nightmares or anything like that. But I was seeking answers, like trying to understand what happened right after that incident. And so upon reading that, I kind of understood more why everything slows down, why your body is able to, react to the threat. And really a lot of it's training, right? It comes into play without you even doing it. So I started understanding that stuff, but there were still facts of the offense I didn't understand because obviously I didn't know everything the detectives had discovered. So when we went to trial, kind of plays into that, and I was on the stand and obviously testified for the prosecution, and they gave me, the questions and tried to answer the best of my ability. what I could recall, because a lot of it was dark, and it happened so quick. And so I remember distinctively, though, that one of them, it was prosecutor of defense, asked me, like, did you know, like you said this individual shot at you multiple times? And I said, yes, he did. And they said, well, I mean, how is that possible? And I said, well, what do you mean? How's that possible? I lived it, right? It happened. Because I heard it back there when I was back there. You heard pow, 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 gunshots. And so they said, well, how is that possible? Because they didn't find any casings in the backyard belonged to the gun, and he had a Glock. And I said, well, it doesn't make sense to me because I know that, he was shooting at me. And so what I came to learn, really the effects of it is that what I was hearing. So whenever he ran out of the trailer, I don't know how many bullets he had, but he emptied all his rounds in that Glock, shooting at Martin and maybe Flores and those guys out front when he saw that threat, right? So he fired off all the rounds, and so by the time he brushed me and he turned to look at me and pointed the gun at me and was shooting, he wasn't shooting rounds. So because of the tunnel vision and the audio, just I don't know the exact words for it, right? But because of that, really what you heard were the click, 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 and when you're in the moment, those are gunshots, and so that's what I heard. And so I really in real time, sitting on the stand, I learned like this happened to me, like this is what happened to me, and started understanding some of that stuff too. So it was, it was hard. I mean, it was hard to testify to it just because you knew there's a family that suffered from this, and you knew as a young guy, like you drove on. It's like Junior said, the next day we had lunch, and that was like our debrief, right? And the only thing I could think of after that was get back to work. Because that's where you needed to be. That's where your partner was. That's where your brothers were. That's where, you felt at home. And so, but yeah, testifying was, it was interesting though.
Yeah, you move on, you go on with your life and work, and there's many more bad guys out there, but those families are, their lives are shattered.
Absolutely,
forever.
Yeah. And I want to say the trial actually was May of 2012, so about three years after this.
Yeah.
So as a police officer down in Southeast, there was a lot of life and a lot of calls in between that time, and so you had to go back and relive it basically. So yeah, and I think, that's what it was. You had to relive it though.
And he got the death penalty.
Yeah, he ended up getting the death penalty, which much deserved, and definitely with the history that you heard about prior to those calls and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, that's an amazing painting of that incident you just painted for the listener. I don't think we could have gotten more detail with that, but there was a lot of moving parts to that night, and then the trial after, and then what those guys did before. Thanks for sharing. I'm glad you got talked into coming on here because I've been wanting. There's so much crime in City of Dallas and all over, and especially Southeast. A lot of incidents kind of just get forgotten and lost in time.
I had wanted to talk to you about this days after it happened. I remember seeing you several times in the station, and I was wanting to approach you, and I thought, I don't know if it'll just bother him right now if I come up and start asking all these questions about that shooting. So I'm glad you came on and shared it for us. Finally get to hear it.
Yeah.
Danny was taking notes early on and started a podcast many years later.
Yeah. I'll tell you, so for me, my debrief, like we mentioned, was the lunch. It was with Kuros and Junior, and that was my debrief. I think I went out to the range and requalified, right? And I think I spent 15 minutes with the psych doctor, and they didn't require much more. And in my case, I think that was probably what was best for me. And obviously, everybody reacts differently, but I think that was best for me. And yeah, I don't know if you would have asked me about it. I don't know if I would have talked to you about it or not back then.
Or maybe not as much insight too. That needs to sit for a while, and you have better introspect on yourself in the event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, as we progress, like I said, in this profession, we only get better. And I think as we talk more about the incidents, because again, this is just one of many that happened at Southeast. I mean, we all in here can talk about what happened on a certain Friday night or on a Saturday night, because that's what we did. Yeah. Has it changed? No, but I think the calls are still there where moving forward, if there's an incident, we've gotten better. I've been now in my position where I go out there with the officers. And that's one of the main things is to make sure that they're okay. Because, we learn from others. Like I said, we read books. He's read a couple books. I've read emotional survival from law enforcement from, Kevin Gilmartin. That was a big thing because that put in perspective what you just went through. And even then, after that, it was just, hey, if this happens and you go through this is exactly how you can deal with it.
We have a lot more education now in this unit. We actually have like psych eds after every OIS or one of the crazy critical incidents. We like what you were trying to come understand with how your body reacted from a physiological standpoint. We were not educated on stuff like that, and now we try to do better at getting the education out there so you actually understand what's going on with your body and mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, clearly the department's made such progress in that. I mean, just the wellness unit and additional resources that they're offering and stuff like that is just the knowledge base and the studies and all that stuff is, it's out there though.
Yeah, I'm glad that, we have a story that people can learn from. And then at the same time understand that, hey, this is what happens afterwards. But I think this is a good example of how to tell your story. And actually, people understand like what you've been through within this department. Because, like I said, everybody has stories, so I think it's a good platform for us to do that. Yeah,
that was one of our missions is to give people a platform to tell the stories. Because now, I mean, we're all in different roles, and Justin, I mean, neck deep in paperwork and data that he has to comb through for his cases, and nobody would probably ever remember.
On top of the work he does for the ATO.
And on top of the work he does for the ATO. I mean, it's we're gonna get into that. He's our treasurer, and he has to go through those numbers, So, and I think a lot of people, like I said, his story, and Junior's story gets lost in history. Speaking of a Southeast story, I remember this when you told me about it the other day, but it's another story that's gotten lost in history is the dog Justice. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, at some point, Junior decided to break our partnership up, and I was brokenhearted.
He had enough of you?
Yeah. Too many incidents, right? And so too much driving probably. So he decided to go be an NPO and work for Zimmerman out there. And at that point, we were, regardless, that was probably 2011 maybe.
If I remember, I tried to get both of you to go over there and hang out for a little bit, but
you just got one.
Yeah.
Well, no, you got two. Q went.
That's
Q
right.
Went. Yeah.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, he ended up over there too.
Well, and I'll just be completely honest with you. So Junior went over there and he tried to take me with him and stuff like that, right? But we're still young on, and the way I saw it, and I saw these community meetings, and hopefully I don't get in trouble here, but I'll bring it around full circle. But I saw these community meetings like, no, man, there's like real police work to do out there. There's real guys that need to go to jail, real fights going on and stuff like that. I don't want to go to these community meetings and hear about, loud music and stuff like that, right? And it really, so he tried, and I just wouldn't do it. And so at some point, I think maybe January 2012 or something like that, after about 6 months to a year of them trying, I was like, you know what? All my friends are doing it now. They're all NPOs, I said, and you got a lot of young guys coming up, as on Third Watch, and it was hard. I had found a good partner, Jaime Alvarado. I'd found a good partner to ride with. I said, but let me give this a try. I want to go over there and reunite with Junior and him. So I said, let me give this a try, and so I did. And they gave me one of the toughest areas, probably over Lake June Masters area and all that stuff, right? And I will say, by far, to bring it full circle, you started going to those community meetings and meeting those people, and sometimes they were older people, younger people, Hispanics, whatever it was. You heard their stories, and you sat back there, and it's like we were talking about earlier about, Pleasant Grove, and you were like, wow, hold on. Like, these are the people I signed up as a police officer to help. The people that go to work every day, come home, or retired in this neighborhood, and they're just trying to live their lives, live the best lives, provide for their families. And you got this criminal element out here that's really harassing them, whether it's burglaries or loud music or something, but really dissolving the peace in that Pleasant Grove area. And so that was probably one of the most rewarding jobs that I had once y'all got me over there, was acting as an NPO, because I felt like even as a one man or whatever it was, I could go solve that person's problem. If they had a problem with loud music, I could go sit in front of that house next door and I could solve that problem. And you just felt like you were accomplishing.
That's how we came about that Justice, the dog, and that's a whole nother probably another episode, but that's just kind of an example of, again, we're like, oh, we're going to the NPO unit and see what we can do over there. But it was the same crew that was on third watch now going over there. And now you're on special assignment to do exactly what you're expected to do. So, and you get all the information and you get to work it. So, yeah, there's, even after that, like I said, encountering this situation with Justice was a small meeting where they gave us information about a dog that had been burned and badly. And I think we were at the meeting and they found it, and that's how it started.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Lake Junior Masters, that was my area at the time, but back then the NPOs, on evenings I know that we dealt with directly were Martin Rivera, Quiros, Junior, I, and Wolverton. Were you there at that time?
I don't think so.
Okay. So really it was the four of us, right? And so we had already been working together just, at Southeast Third Watch. And so if we had issues in our respective areas, we would meet up at 7 o'clock one night and say, hey, we have an issue in this apartment. We have an issue in this one. And, we had been doing that at that apartment at Lake Junior Masters for a long time. I think it was like 1265 or something like that, just because we had issues. And then we did get a reporting of the dog being burned out there. And remember, at this time, there was no animal cruelty unit. There was none of that in the department, not even at the DA's office at that time. And so in the back at Southeast, they were the ones that investigated those offenses. And so when they got word of it, they knew that we had been hitting that apartment quite often and basically documenting stuff, criminal trespassing people, taking pictures of people and all this stuff, just being proactive like we were as patrol. So once they got word of it, of course, then the video got released to news, or somebody got video of it from the apartment, and it just went haywire, went national. And so there were some older detectives at Southeast, and they were good detectives, but so I remember one guy got assigned it, a detective in the back, and another guy had talked to him and said, hey, listen, I've worked these cases before, these pit bulls or dogs fighting or whatever, and this is going to be a case. And I think that detective was kind of like, I don't know if it's going to be that big. It's just maybe another case. And before you knew it, within 24 hours of everybody learning about it, that case just exploded. And so the way we got involved in it is because we were proactive in documenting and dealing with the individuals.
And I don't know if you were out there that day, because I remember the dog. Yeah. And it was where people were hanging out in the late hour of the night, and we were third watch. They were out there hanging out, and it happened to be that right at the time after they had filmed that video, we were actually on the property, just rolling around, seeing what's going on, and then somebody flagged us down. We found that dog, which was a small, like I said, pit bull, behind an AC unit. And we were like, what are you talking about? And they're like, they just burned a dog. And we're like, oh, so now we got a dog. It's burnt. All right. Let's see what we can do.
How did they burn? Did you find out how did they burn the dog?
They threw lighter fluid, and then they didn't know who the dog belonged to. So what they did is just, it was just lingering around. They were hanging out. They just decided to just light it on fire. So they put fluid on him, and then instinctively, the dog, once it was caught on fire, just tried to go around and try to find someone. So when we found it, it was very bad. That dog, we called animal control to come out there. They came out. We did our report. But then, like he said, after it got to the back, that's when it really went wild with that call. And again, it was just us trying to just see what we could do, and we just find ourselves in certain situations all the time.
Yeah. So did the dog survive? I remember the news story, but I couldn't remember.
No, actually, I think they ended up having to put the dog down.
Okay.
Yeah, because the trauma and everything.
He was badly burned. He was toasted. Didn't even look like a dog. The skin and the fur was all gone. But yeah, it was a case after that kind of blew up nationwide.
I remember the news story, and then ending justice, and then how did that investigation kind of play out in a nutshell?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons it blew up really is because once they obtained the video, is like these kids. I mean, really, is what they were. Is they had no. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. There was no reason the dog wouldn't attack anybody. They just did it just to do it, And I think that's why it blew up so bad. But so it gets assigned to these detectives in the back, and because we had been working that area and working those, really, as a patrol officer, you really are, especially if you have a good relationship with your detectives at the station level. You're kind of like the eyes and ears, kind of like deployment is sometimes to those guys, right? Sometimes the detectives get a case. When they got this case, they came to us because they knew that we had been working that apartment, and they really just said, hey, listen, I mean, we have the story, we know this and that and everything, but here's a video. Can you guys help us? And so we went out and started asking questions, and they went out too and started asking questions. We just started beating feet and knocking doors and asking the questions, and the reality is that nobody wanted to help you. Because one is maybe they were scared of whoever had done it. Nobody wanted to give you answers. And so you really, and the apartment was filled with bad people. And so you really had to start taking enforcement action. I mean, really, because you understood that, just like every other neighborhood, you had good people that lived in this apartment. And so then if you guys don't want to cooperate and you don't want to help, then we need to start dealing with these problems. If you're not going to deal with them, come clean and deal with them. And so we did. We started taking enforcement action. I mean, dealing with people who had warrants, knocking on doors. And so as the case kind of built, those detectives, I mean, they had no choice. They worked very closely with the DA. And the DA was national, right? And so the DA had to react to it, too, on an enhanced level. And so the DA assigned some prosecutors. I think one of the prosecutors, his name was David Alex, and I had never met him before, but he was kind of put in charge of the case. And so I'll tell you, they did a phenomenal job. The detectives in the back at Southeast, they did a phenomenal job and just kind of coming to us. And so they just kind of worked it.
Who were they?
So they were Tommy Wiesner and Sam Carr. Those were the detectives assigned to it. And so that was probably one of the first cases I realized, like, hey, we can work this thing together. Because you actually had the patrol element on the NPOs, Junior and I, and Martin and Q and whoever else are there. And then you had the detectives at the station level, and then you had the prosecutors. And so it was in real time. I mean, the detectives would brief the prosecutors, and prosecutors would tell them, like, hey, we think these are people are witnesses. We need to subpoena them before the grand jury, stuff like that. And they'd come down to us because we were the people that knew the people, right? And so they'd hand us the subpoenas, and Junior and I'd go out and knock on doors at the apartment and say, well, I know you don't want to be part of this, but it's reality now, and so here's your subpoena. And so we just worked to bring it full circle. And at the end of it, they were able to identify the suspect and file charges on him and put him in jail, though. So
that is the great example of the true will of justice going, that's amazing work.
It is, because if you watch that video, you can't identify anybody in that video. So it's true meaning of where there's a will, there's a way. And so it came full circle. So, yeah.
Got justice.
Got justice for justice, yeah. So.
And you met your future wife.
I did. So with Sam and Tommy Wiesner, they were older detectives in the unit back there at Southeast. And similar to MPO, right? I had no desire to be a detective. I was kind of enjoying the job I was doing at the time. And Tommy Wiesner talked to me because they were only there for about 6 more months, and I had worked for them for that 6 months. And Wiesner said, hey, a couple of us are leaving. Would you be interested? And I was like, nah, I have no interest. I like working with Junior and, those guys. And, we're living our good life, the best life, right? And so I said, no, I have no interest. But after a couple more talkings, from Wiesner, and, Wiesner, if you knew Wiesner, he's just an old country guy.
He old school. So, he wore short sleeve button-down shirts with a tie.
Yeah.
Like an old school 80s detective.
Absolutely. But he had no problem breaking it off in somebody, if they needed it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, he was. He might as well have been from Seagoville. I learned later he lived further out east. So
his sweet mustache, too.
Absolutely. So he talked to me a couple more times about it over that investigation, right? And he really, convinced me that, hey, maybe this is something you should do, And so that's where I gained an interest of it and interviewed for that job at Southeast Property Crimes.
And that's where you met beautiful wife.
Unbeknownst to me, she had been back there for a little bit, and she was out on leave. And so whenever I fell into place, interviewed, got the job, I just claimed a desk. So a couple weeks later,
she showed up.
Yeah, a couple weeks later, walks this beautiful woman, right? And when she walks in, we had known each other from Southeast Patrol. But when she walks in, she was wondering what the hell all my stuff was doing on her desk. So, yeah.
She's super non-confrontational also, right?
Yeah.
So you just awkwardly shared the desk together because you didn't confront each other on it?
No, I probably packed all my stuff up and moved to the next row over by Doug Jones. And
the sharing of the desk was going to turn into the common law marriage. That's how it happened.
Well, yeah, it might as well.
Yeah.
It was all her property from the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how that happened though. And I was, everybody, I think we all are believers here, right? And, when you look back on life and you just know that even starting from West Point, right? I mean, there's a reason God brought me home, and I didn't understand it at the time, and there's a reason God, put us on this call, and there's a reason God put us in that apartment with that dog, and there's a reason God put Tommy Wiesner in my life and convinced me to go back there to the back. And, 20 years later, I understand what that all is, but you don't understand it in a moment, though. But yeah.
That's great reflection. I want to get into your current job in financial crimes. I mean, being in legal, I saw how much evidence you have to go through in that kind of case. Can you tell the listener just kind of what types of cases your unit investigates?
Yeah, and a little backstory. So in 2012, I went to Southeast Property Crimes, and I was there about 2 years. And of course, my wife, Heidi, was working in that unit, so we wanted to separate a little bit. But, I felt like in property crimes, you were dealing with a lot of the same people you were dealing with on calls, right? And so I just wanted to get out of that life because I felt like you were dealing with people that are lying to you even when they didn't have to lie to you. I mean, it's almost like you're a witness. You didn't do the burglary and you don't have to lie to me, but you're like, I wasn't there. And it's like, well, just tell me you don't want to talk to me and don't tell me you weren't there. I know you're there. But so I was looking for something else. And at the time we had Dylan. Rod Dillon was our sergeant. And so I had mentioned to him, I was working an extra job once and I was trying to figure out how can I get out of, the property crimes. And I didn't really have an avenue, didn't know how to do that. And so I started researching on the phone, other certifications, maybe going private, like leaving the department. And when I did, I learned about the CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner certification, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And so I came in one day and I talked to Dylan and I just mentioned to him that, I really think that I may be interested in the financial side of, crime or fraud or, away from property crimes, right? And so he had put me in touch with Ken Haben, who was a sergeant up in financial crimes at the time, and I had never met him. But he was good friends with the president of the ACFE, actually, who was an officer detective in Vice back in the 80s before he left DPD to go and help start that unit or start that association, Jim Ratley. And so I met him, and he sent me to a course on ACFE, and I just, from there I fell in love with the fraud side of the house. And so I interviewed for financial crimes a couple times, and the second time I think I finally got it. The first time I had only been in property crimes, for a short time, so they didn't want to take me. But yeah, so the second time I finally got it in 2014, went to financial crimes and started investigating the fraud side. It
seems like a lot of the detectives that are in that unit are there for a long time, and a lot of them you don't know or never know that they're actually there or hear from them, because it is a very you have to get so in depth in these things, and financial crime isn't like homicide or robbery or narcotics. It affects so many people, and a lot of people just aren't educated on the effects of it.
No, and that's true. A number of us have been up there for a decade plus, and part of that is because you really learn the elements of these offenses, and they're intricate. In our cases now, you watch body cam, and when you watch body cam, and Junior can probably attest to this as a detective, sometimes you have officers, probably on our cases more than others, when they encounter the fraud side of it or fraud material or evidence, you see them questioning it and wondering, what is this? I know I have something, but I don't know what it is, And fraud is one thing that we're all impacted by, but not all of us understand. And so you really learn that when you go over to the courthouse, for example, and get subpoenas signed. And judges will ask you, well, what is this case or what's it about? And you'll tell them, and all of them will look up like, with that mad face, not at you, but they've all been impacted by it. And so they're supportive of the investigations or whatever they may be.
Okay. What are some of the common offenses? Swindle, elderly, are they some of the common victims?
Yeah, absolutely. So the offenses we see most common up there are, of course, you have your forgeries, credit card abuse, stuff like that happens as a result of burglaries and stuff. But the most common ones really are the fraud, the identity theft. So we see a ton of identity theft. And, nowadays in life, we used to talk to people and they were so concerned, like, how did they get my stuff? But you had to explain to them. And now I think most people understand that, we've all been exposed. All of our stuff is out there somewhere along, who knows what hacked or what, method that they came across it. But all of our stuff is out there. And the best thing we can do is just try and protect it. But other than identity theft, the most heinous crimes we see up there really are the exploitation of elderly or disabled individuals and stuff like that.
Can you talk about some of those, about how the methods that these victims, what they go through?
Yeah, I mean, so, you have to understand that when we're talking about elderly individuals, you have people that, live off Social Security, and then you have those individuals who saved up every penny they could save, for a better life, right? And so they have that savings account to take care of the, their health care and stuff like that as they grow older. And so those people are impacted. One is, it's not always a physical touch now with the convenience of the internet. A lot of that stuff is done over the internet. And so somebody may contact them and say, hey, I'm with Microsoft and you've been compromised. We need access to your computer to kind of look for the malware or whatever it may be. And so then they give them access, remote access, and they don't realize it. But then they ask them to log into their bank account, stuff like that. And so these people gain access, or maybe they won the lottery or something like that. And it's just, they always convince these people, though, don't contact your family and don't tell your kids because your kids are greedy and they're going to want a part of it and they're going to take everything you got. Or don't tell them you've been victimized, because if you do that, they're going to stick you in a home or kind of separate you or something like that. So, but the other than that, I mean, we, other than dealing with the exploitation stuff, it's one thing is, regardless of how much money somebody has, is that you understand and you learn that people are just always going to come back. As long as if you give anything, they're always going to come back to you, and they're always going to want more money. And even our victims, I mean, sometimes we have victims that report those crimes and they're contacted again and they give more money. And so we're just trying our best up there. We have a couple detectives that are focused on those crimes that try their best just to go out and kind of give them the knowledge, or go to the banks and tell the old people sometimes, like, don't do it. You know nothing about Bitcoin. Don't buy Bitcoin and send it to somebody. That's not your area of expertise. So that's kind of what they focus on, though.
So that's an older demographic, I think we see with the internet stuff, right? And the emails and what we say, I don't know, phishing and going for that. What about a younger demographic? What are they more susceptible to, or where are you seeing fraud with them?
Yeah, I mean, especially with our younger generation. So we know that, convenience is a matter of importance to them. And a lot of them don't want to go to a 9-to-5. And so what they'll do is, I mean, sometimes straight out of high school, they'll upload resumes to Indeed or, these online job resume, companies, and they'll upload these. And before you know it, as a detective, you're sitting across from somebody that has deposited a check for $50,000 and try to withdraw funds and send somewhere else. And really, I mean, that's one of the victim or the scams that they're the victim of is, because they're looking for convenience, they're looking for fast money, right? And so they are hired as executive assistants, or, some corporate entity is moving to Dallas and we want you to be the face of it. So we're going to send you a check for $5,000. You deposit this and you keep $200 or $100, and then you wire the other funds to this person. And really, they're being used as money mules or couriers and that's how they're moving the money, And at the end of the day, patrol, they don't understand it because they don't live it. And so we see it every day. But a patrol officer may encounter that individual at a bank or at a PLS, and they may see that person as a suspect. But the reality is, a lot of our crimes nowadays on the fraud side is we have to tell patrol officers to slow down, because it's totally possible. Now, we don't give that information to the suspect, right? We want to interview that person, because it's totally possible the person you're looking at and that you're capable of putting in jail tonight may be a victim of their own scam. I mean, none of these scams are one-legged, right? You have multiple elements, multiple branches of these scams. And so they may use all of us in this room to move that money. And so if a patrol officer in Connecticut looks at a case involving Junior, they may see him as a suspect, but the reality is he's a victim of a scam that sent money to Joe, that sent money to Daniel, or Danny, and sent money to me, And so as a detective in that unit, you really understand, one is you understand identity theft, so don't always file on somebody because a complainant said, hey, his name is, Junior, and that's who the suspect is, because you understand the elements of identity theft and also fraud. And so you just have to look deeper in these cases. So
how long did it take you to get acclimated to that, go from property crime to this level of, there's so many levels of this kind of investigation. How long did you feel comfortable actually doing this?
It took a couple of years. So I think prior, probably to 2014, you had a couple of detectives that understood the identity theft element. But I think that if you talk to other people in the unit, they really weren't investigating it too much.
Well, because it's evolved so much, too, with this, with so many, everything that technology.
Exactly. And then some of those detectives were probably similar to, like at Southeast, you only knew what you had learned, right? And so you didn't understand the way these fraud rings work and stuff like that. Now, we did have some great gypsy detectives. You had Dana and you had Casey. Those guys back there, they could teach you anything about gypsies. And so they had left right before I came. But going to classes with those guys, you knew they were very knowledgeable about that stuff. But remember, those offenses were hands-on. So you were actually able to reach out, touch somebody, right, and interview them and stuff like that, versus the advent of the internet and the offenses. So about 2 years. It probably took me about 2 years really to get a grasp of it. And about that time is when I, fortunately for me, actually, I went over to business kind of offenses and so to embezzlements. So and
How difficult is that?
So, some people think they're a little bit easier only because you have an identifiable suspect, right? You have somebody that was actually employed at the business. We do have identity theft involved in those sometimes, but it's a little bit easier, but you are packaging a case. So it's longer term cases, the process of obtaining all the records and really analyzing those records. So I will tell you, not to get in trouble again here, but so there are resources out there that will assist in those investigations. Those resources cost a lot of money, though, and so therefore, departments aren't always willing to put that money out. So therefore, those cases, the investigation of those cases, and you talk about the feds. I mean, those guys have analysts and stuff.
I was just going to ask, what is the percentage of these cases that are actually federal? Because I don't know how involved the state would be.
The states on our side, I mean, none of our cases on the embezzlement side really go federal. I mean, most of them are all state. I mean, they're all state cases, yeah. And so they range from, $20,000 all the way up to, hundreds of thousands or $1 million. I mean, it all depends. And so I will say one of the most interesting thing about the embezzlement-related cases, the occupational fraud, is really you deal with a different industry every time, right? And so you don't know what's going to walk through the door. And in order to fully investigate a case, you have to sit that company down or go out to their location, and you have to learn their processes, learn their procedures, and learn how, installation warehouses work. Or learn how, pet stores work, whatever it may be, right? But you have to learn, but you learn so much. And I mean, you learn so much, you're like, man, maybe after this, I should go start this kind of business or that kind of business because, I mean, they're so intricate, but, none of them are the same. Now, we may get apartment manager cases that are the same, but you really learn. And so
you really start learning a whole new language every time you started a different case with a different kind of company.
It sounds like a whole different career than a police job almost. It's so specialized. You went from talking about Code 3 and shootings and burnt dogs to insulation warehouses. Is this a different episode we're doing now?
Yeah, it's
flipping bank statements. Yeah. So I'll tell you, my current partner right now up there, there's only 2 of us on the department that do these employee theft related cases. So my current partner, when he came over, he asked me, he goes, hey, so what's the procedure for doing these cases? Like, well, how come you didn't do that one, but you didn't the last one, but not on this case? And I said, no. I said, that's the thing about these cases. Every one of them is different. The way you paint that picture, it's based on the evidence and the schemes. And some of these cases have 5 fraud schemes going on, at the same time. And so you just have to paint that picture differently. And you have to paint it so a prosecutor understands it. And you have to paint it so when that prosecutor presents that case to a grand jury and to a jury of 12 people, they can see through it too.
As far as the prosecution side, do they have specialty prosecutors for these type of cases?
Yeah, so we mainly on these cases deal with specialized over there at the DA's office.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, so as a patrol officer and a property crimes detective, you rarely deal with your prosecutors. You file these cases, you may never hear about them again. The good thing with these embezzlement-related cases is you deal with a specialized unit over there, a core group of prosecutors over there. And even over the years, I've been doing them since 2016, there's always been great prosecutors over there. And if they don't understand anything, then they ask you. Or, I mean, because sometimes they don't understand everything, right? And so they need you to spell it out for them. And so you'll show them, and you'll come over, and you'll talk spreadsheets, and you'll talk bank statements and all that stuff over a cup of coffee, whatever it may be. And, you just paint that verbal picture for them. And, a lot of times, they understand it, or if they need anything, they'll reach out to you. So it's a closer relationship.
It's a lot of collaboration.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that why the statute of limitations are so long for these type of offenses?
Yeah.
Because it takes so long to investigate and to put together?
Yeah, definitely. So on many of the offenses, statute of limitations could be 7, 10 years. Yeah, and I think on identity theft it may be 10. And some of the times it's just because the investigations take a while. Unfortunately they do. They just do.
How many of these cases do you actually see go to trial?
So in embezzlement related, I've been doing it since 16. I've probably gone to trial maybe 5 times. And I'll tell you, I've gotten, I remember specifically as a got not guilty verdict. And I remember it hung with me for a little bit, right? Because I put a lot of work into these cases, and to me, it was clear. And I just didn't understand the not guilty verdict, and I didn't understand it. And so I was confused. But you move on. You move on to the next case, right? And so you try and do better on the next one. And sure enough, a year later, company walks into me with a notebook, the way they turn our cases in, and we sit down, and I talk to her, and she's like, yeah, this is what happened. My bookkeeper did this or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, well, let me see your notebook. And I look at the notebook, and I flip the page, and the first name there, the suspect, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I say, here we go, And so it turns out while we were in trial that this employee was actually stealing from this other company. And so we get round 2. And so, it just teaches you, though. You just do, you try
persistence.
And do a better job. Yeah. So, but yeah.
That's incredible. I'm glad we got you talking about this, because it seems like Danny says, we're far removed from that 733 Cliffview now, and now it's a
little less critical. Yeah,
and a lot of the people that had their blood pressure amped up.
Do you have any
during
exciting
that.
videos of some of these investigations you've done with fraud?
Well, I've got some exciting interviews, but they don't lie as well as property crimes did. But so yeah.
Do a lot of them plead out? Is that what happens?
Yeah, a lot of them do plead out, and I will say that when they do plead out, this is one thing I'll give the DA credit on too. They understand. So first of all, is anybody in this room may feel differently than me, but when I really became a part of the ACFE and I got that certification, I started understanding, just like NPO, where you realize these community members, they're actually victims. We don't see them every day because they aren't the ones calling 911, but they're victims in their neighborhood. And so what I learned is, as I got, the certified fraud examiner certification, stuff like that, is I started learning, a lot of people don't see it, but businesses are victims too. These businesses, they serve our communities. They employ the people.
Definitely.
And, they're the ones suffering financial loss. And a lot of people that come to us, they aren't the corporations. Really, they're the small businesses that have 30 employees, 5 employees. And when you hear their story, they're having to lay people off. And some of these businesses go out of business based on what the suspect did. And so it really made a difference, started impacting me. And so when I do tell these stories about this, one thing I always try to tell is, especially when you're talking about chain of command, I know a lot of times we're talking about violent criminals, and we're rightfully so we should be. But there's a lot of victims out there too, especially in the business community and stuff like that, they're the ones that pay the taxes too, and they're the ones that, employ officers and all these things, and they really need to be served, and I think sometimes they're not adequately served on manpower issues, and I think that's because society expects violent crime to be down. They should. And it should be down, but we just have to make sure we allocate the resources towards that community also.
Absolutely. It's got to be such an honor to work on a case for so long and then see it come to close. Absolutely.
And when you're able to talk to that complainant, the owner or the manager, whoever it may be, just kind of give them some resolution. And I was going to say the props I'd give to the DA is, so when you do plead a lot of these cases out now, what the DA is requiring them to do, if they don't want to go to prison, if they have not got that lengthy criminal history, sometimes what the DA is requiring them to do is to bring money to the table. If you're going to want probation or whatever it is, if we're going to talk about probation, then you bring some restitution to the table. And we all have been involved in those criminal cases. Sometimes that's the only time they're going to get money, is when they can make that deal, because, and our victims sometimes ask us, can we just, if they pay us back, will they just pay us back? And, of course, we've seen the financial account. We know the financial status of that suspect. We know they have no money. And the only way they're going to pay you back is if they steal it from the next guy or the next employer, and so they're making them bring. And, one story a couple of years ago, and I had an attorney, and they, obviously suspects range all professions, had an attorney that stole $1 million from an escrow account from a client. And so obviously a client needed that $1 million, but he stole it and stole it on personal stuff, transferred to family members, stuff like that. And so to get probation, obviously that attorney was probably somewhere between 65, 70 years old. He didn't go to prison. And I don't know if he needed to or not. That's not our call, right? But to get that, he brought restitution to the table. And, it turns out in the end that some elderly parents took out a mortgage on their home to do that for him. So it wasn't just my victim that was a victim of that, it's other family members, his own family members. And, sometimes these victims or suspects, it does get hard sometimes because you realize some of them are just thieves. Some of them will steal from you and they'll steal from the next guy. It's no problem. But when you start doing social media research and stuff like that, and you see their salaries and stuff like that, as it becomes hard because you understand, some of these people steal, and it's never right to steal, right? But some of them steal because they're thieves, and some of them steal out of necessity because they have families and they have young kids, stuff like that too, and they just aren't making enough. Doesn't make it right. But, you know, as a detective in embezzlement, you really have to look at that and take that into consideration, you know, the whole picture, right? I mean, you're not dealing with the guy that walked into Walmart and stole headphones or something like that to walk out, you know? I mean, you're dealing with somebody that there's a whole life behind it, though.
Yeah, and it's such a wide spectrum of crimes. I mean, you got the extreme, like a Bernie Madoff,
Yeah.
and then you got somebody that's ripping off a laundromat
Absolutely.
in the Grove.
Yep.
It's fascinating. It's way over my head, but I'm glad clearly you have a grasp on what you're doing, and I think all the detectives up there have to, because that is a lot to gather and a lot to process and tedious work.
Yeah, they do, and I will just compliment those detectives up there. So even some of the younger detectives we brought up, some of those guys have come from property crimes, or some of those guys have come from assaults or robberies and moved down there. As those guys are doing phenomenal work, and they're doing work that, you know, on some of these cases, I'll tell you that, you know, we have a detective that came from the shooting non-fatal, and when he first came over, I trained him, and he started talking about doing these, you know, tower dumps and stuff like that to solve some of these crimes, and I just kind of took a step back and said, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, I need to put my suspect in that location at that time. And I was like, whoa, hold on, let's slow down. I've never done this. You know, I do embezzlements, I do bank statements, stuff like that. But it made sense. And the only reason he knew how to do that is because he had that experience from non-fatal. And I mean, I commend those guys. Those guys, I mean, I don't know before I got there, but I know the level of work that they do nowadays is above and beyond. So I commend every one of those guys from youngest to oldest. Yeah, absolutely.
That's impressive.
So,
I want to get into your great work with the Assist the Officer Foundation. And you're not on this show just because you're part of the ATO, but can you talk about your role with us and as a treasurer?
Yeah, and similar to every other role I took, so I was in financial crimes and met Ed Lujan, who's the current chairman of ATO. And so he always tells me, he goes, oh, I knew you down there at Southeast Third Watch. And I'm like, no, I never met you down there at Southeast Third Watch. The only reason I knew Ed is because that short stint at Southeast Property Crimes in the back, he'd come back there to the old guys selling football pots, like the squares.
I remember that, yeah.
And I said, Ed, I didn't know you on patrol. We're not
Did
there.
you investigate him?
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I didn't buy any pots either, any squares. So, but that's how I met Ed. And so in financial crimes, we worked together. And, you know, Ed was one of those guys that Ed was, he's a great detective. But he was looking for closure for a victim, and he understood sometimes that closure didn't always, you know, result in putting somebody in jail. You know, sometimes it was, you know, in the suspect and the victim, for example, coming together and making things right. And so Ed did a great job of really bringing resolution to a lot of cases. But anyways, when he, in 2020, 2019, I think he was appointed chairman of ATO. And so when he was appointed chairman, the treasurer of ATO at that time was stepping down. So he came over and he talked to me, and I told him, I said, you know, I've heard about ATO. My wife's volunteered with ATO a lot, and she always volunteered a lot more than I did. I said, you know, I think they do great work. I just don't know what all it's gonna take. I had young kids and stuff like that. We had just had our youngest daughter, and so I said, let me go home and think about it, and you know, I'll let you know. And so, yeah, I thought about it and talked to Heidi about it, and we decided I'd do it, and as a treasurer of ATO, and so yeah.
Probably the most critical job for the organization for sure.
Yeah, and it was right before COVID. And so I was appointed January of 2020. And so I was really trying to get my feet under me. And then COVID kicked in, and all of a sudden people are, you know, I'm thinking like, hey, we need to raise money, right, for our services and all that stuff. And then it's like, hey, we're going to cancel the golf tournament. We're going to cancel this. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. You know, so.
Yeah, everything's slowed to a crawl
Absolutely.
for, I mean, non-profit charities across the country.
Absolutely.
The world. So, yeah, you do a job that none of us want to do.
Yeah.
But it is the most crucial. And it's easy for me to sit in here with a mic, you know, and go out, and I can go out and talk to people and help raise money. But I would have no idea doing the type of work you do. And I want to thank you for that, because you keep this machine going, and this machine service is for officers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just say this, is I've always, you know, my younger days maybe not, but now, I mean, the longer I'm on, I think I just like to be behind the scenes. And so I've told Ed a number of times, and Junior and I were talking about it today with his work with NLEO, is, man, I commend the heck out of you guys for being willing to go into those homes, go meet those families and stuff like that, because it takes special people to do that. And same with you, Joe, and the wellness unit and stuff like that. But I really do, similar to my job now, right? I really like being the one like behind the computer, the numbers and stuff like that. And I think, too, is it serves a purpose. I mean, if you're going to donate, if it's the ATO or any other nonprofit, you really want to know where that money's going. I think it's valuable to be able to inform the donors of where their money's going, their dollars are going. Because, I mean, if I donated, and when I did, I would like to know that it's going to a service that, you're telling me it's going to versus, a lot of other things it could go to.
Justin, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing what you do for the ATO, because I see from the wellness side of all the counseling that we've been providing for the department, and I've seen the numbers. I looked at them the other day because I had to talk to a potential donor, and from 2021 we spent $105,000. In 2022 we spent $183,000. 2023 it was up to $261,000, and then last year it was even over that. It was closer to $300,000. So the services are being utilized, and there is a need there. But in order to have that, the ATO needs to bring in money, and you're the guy that gets it, and you take care of our organization so it can run smoothly. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I got a final question here before we wrap this up. The listeners have heard about your passion of service, where you came from West Point, well, actually from Seagoville to West Point, to the Grove, to shootings, to looking through bank statements, to helping the ATO. But you have a greater, probably more, a service that you do that's more of an honor to you, and that's fatherhood. Can you tell the listener about what that means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we mentioned earlier, when we were in this critical incident, I didn't have any kids, and so I didn't know what it was to feel that back then. Serving in the ATO, you see those applications come across, and you see those, the areas of concern or why people need financial assistance. And, on this department's big, and a lot of times it's because of kids are hurt, or kids are suffering, or kids have sometimes a terminal illness, or whatever it may be. And I'll be completely honest with you, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see that, because I do have kids now, and I know how much I love my kids, and I know my wife and kids, they're the world to me. And so, this job, the reason I just want to get it out there too is I am so grateful for this job and for this city for providing, because that's how I provide for my family, and that's how I'm able to provide for the life. And, those kids, when I go home to them every day, they melt my heart in some different way. They run up to you just like your kids, and they tell you how much they love you, and they need your help with homework. And the greatest joy in my life and the greatest honor in my life is to be a husband and to be a father to my kids. And my son, who's my savior in a house of 4 other girls, and my daughters, he's the one I can joke around with, and he brings sanity to me, and the girls are the ones that bring the compassion and bring the love and the affection. And it melts my heart. And that's why, listen to that body cam we listened to earlier. It's so hard, because you hear those kids yelling in the back of that truck. And, it makes me tear up when I listen to that, because now I understand what that noise is. I understand that, those kids, they don't have that father. And, that's my biggest fear, is that, one day somebody would have to knock on my door and tell my son and daughter and my wife that I'm not coming home, I think if I had a lasting message, for anybody, and first of all, it'd be, thank you, Junior. Thank you for being in the car with me every day and making sure I went home every single day safe, and I hope you feel the same way. But last is, it would just be that, the greatest honor of my life is being able to go home every day to my family. Good day, bad day, but going home every day. Most people that know me, that work with me now, know I'm an eternal optimist, and probably because I know how bad life can get. I know that, this incident made us stronger, but I know that, some people don't get the time we get with their families and their kids, and I'm blessed, God blessed me with these kids and, my wife, and I'm just grateful for that.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Miss Mrs., hey, mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up on you.